tooth fairy.
So then the words don't, now the name, that's the staff. They fix it.
And your name is?
Gigi.
9. Yeah.
Did you guys see my new brand? Have you seen my new brand?
No, I have not. We're show and tell today.
Mr. Mayor, it's 6 p.m. Are we ready to begin?
And we are ready to begin.
Recording in progress.
Welcome all. Good evening. And welcome to the regular meeting of the Petaluma City Council and the Petaluma Community Development Successor Agency for Monday, September 16th, 2024. May we have a roll call?
Barnacle?
Present.
Cater Thompson?
Here.
Healy?
Here.
Now?
Here.
Posake?
Here.
Shribs?
Here.
McDonald?
Here.
And we have a quorum.
Thank you. We the purpose of this early time, 6 o'clock, is to go to a closed session, and I'd like to invite our attorney to discuss what our closed session is this evening.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. The council will have a conference with legal counsel regarding existing litigation. That's under Government Code Section 54956.9, Subdivision A. It's a workers' compensation case. The claimant is Brandon Hansen. The city is the entity claimed against, and it's workers' compensation claim number 613497. Thank you.
Thank you. The public is invited to speak on the closed session that we're having right now, items specifically to the closed session. Public comments are limited to 3 minutes per person. I'd like to invite our clerk to read our messaging for the evening.
Members of the public attending in person should bring their speaker cards to the clerk's desk if they have not already done so. Speakers are reminded to be respectful in their comments, and the timer behind the dais will be reset for each speaker. And we have not received any cards.
And we're not seeing anyone rushing forward, so we're going to close the public comment on this item, and with that, we will adjourn to closed session, and we will endeavor to be back here by 6:30. So this meeting is adjourned to closed session.
Mr. Mayor, it's 6:30. Are we ready to begin?
We are ready to begin our meeting for the evening.
Oh, we're recording.
Good. Well, good evening, everybody, and this is our call to order. Good evening and welcome to the regular meeting of the Petaluma City Council and the Petaluma Community Development Successor Agency for Monday, September 16, 2024. If you wish to provide a public comment on tonight's agenda, please fill out a speaker card. They're in the back, and bring it to our city clerk here in the front. Now, I'd like to invite our Monica Aparicio and Maria Galvez to provide information to those who wish to participate in Spanish tonight.
Thank you and good evening. Buenas tardes, me llamo Mónica y estoy aquí con mi pareja de interpretación, María. Estamos hoy aquí como intérpretes. Hoy este evento se llevará a cabo en español e inglés. Se usarán ambos idiomas activamente, así que usted podrá elegir un canal para participar en su idioma preferido después de que le hayamos explicado cómo funcionará la interpretación. Estaremos usando la función de interpretación de Zoom. Después que termine esta explicación, se activará la función de interpretación. Si usted se está conectando con su computadora, usted verá un icono de un mundo en la parte inferior de su pantalla. Si usted está conectado con su tableta o teléfono, pulse en más y verá un menú que incluye la opción de interpretación de idiomas. Para escuchar la interpretación, pulse el icono del mundo o interpretación de idiomas. A continuación, elija su canal de idioma. Gracias. Thank you. We're ready.
Thank you. I would like to note that we have some very good seats up front. They don't cost any more than the seats in the back. If someone would like to join us on this side or even in here. And may I ask the city clerk to take our roll call for the evening?
Barnacle?
Present.
Cater Thompson?
Here.
Healy?
Here.
Now?
Here.
Posake?
Here.
Shribs?
Here.
McDonald?
Here.
And we have a quorum.
Let's rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. In a moment of silence, please. As a note, we will be closing tonight's meeting in memory of Max Mickelson. Max was a community contributor for very many years, fair board member in our community, and he'll be missed and passed this past week. I'm looking up and down the agenda to see if we have any suggested changes, deletions to our agenda. Seeing none, we'll do that by acclaim and move to the next item, which is a report out of our closed session. And I'd like to invite our City Attorney, Eric Danley, to advise us on this matter.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. There is no action to report tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. And that moves us to one of our funny events of the evening, one of the community appreciation things that we do here at City Council. We have a proclamation. It is the National Service Dog Month, and I'd like to invite Ron McKissick and Florian Fanti from the Canine Companions to come to the front to receive the proclamation while I read it. Whereas National Service Dog Month is an opportunity to celebrate the joyful, transformative power of the human-canine bond and inclusivity it offers all citizens. And whereas in the United States, 64 million adults and children have a disability, but only 16,000 service dogs from accredited training programs exist nationwide, and the need is growing. Canine Companions is a nonprofit organization that enhances the lives of people with disabilities by providing expertly trained service dogs and ongoing support to ensure quality partnerships. And whereas Canine Companions and their service dogs empower people with disabilities to lead life with greater independence by providing best-in-class training, ongoing follow-up services, and a deeply committed community of support. Whereas National Service Dog Month aims to educate our community about the benefits of service dogs and the laws protecting them, and whereas the City of Petaluma continues to work towards becoming an inclusive community in which all citizens and their service dogs are embraced, now therefore be it resolved that I, Kevin McDonald, Mayor of Petaluma, along with members of the Petaluma City Council, do hereby acknowledge September 2024 as National Service Dog Month, and encourage all citizens to celebrate service dogs and be respectful to the adults, children, and veterans who lead more independent lives because of their assistance. Thank you.
Thank you guys. Oh, thank you so much. This is a sensitive microphone and I'm a loud person, so I'll just go like this. Canine Companions was founded and is still headquartered right here in Sonoma County, but we are the largest provider of service dogs in the United States, and we're super proud of that. You'll see a number of our clients and our volunteer puppy raisers are here, our clients with their service dogs, and we're just so excited to have the support of the City of Petaluma to say that it is Service Dog Month. Ron, did you want to say anything about?
It's just been wonderful to have Dallas. Thank you very much.
Thank you all so much. Happy Service Dog Month.
Our next item tonight is a presentation from regarding micro enterprise home kitchen operations. And to help us with this, we have Christine Sosko, who is the Director of Environmental Health for Sonoma County Health Services. Welcome, and take it away here.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor and council members. I'm thankful to be here tonight. I'm going to talk about the micro enterprise home kitchen operations, which is referred to as MICOs. And this item will be going before Sonoma County Board of Supervisors. Our slide here says October 8th, but it's been pushed to October 22nd. Next slide. So, we went to, sorry. Sorry. The micro enterprise home kitchens were, it's a law that came into effect back in 2017, and that was AB 626. And this really is, it's an opportunity for small scale restaurants to be operated out of a home, and for those residents to be able to kind of give a food facility a try with that lower entry into the business. And there have been a couple changes to this law over the last couple of years. The most recent one was AB 1325, which happened last year, and that raised the limits on the amount of meals that you can serve and also the total revenue for the year. Next slide. So MICOs are home-based businesses. Like I said, it's a lower capital to get into that business and a lower barrier. And they were really set up for those like disadvantaged persons that want to start a food-related business but don't have that capital to start out. They also really increase that community access to foods. Often those cultural foods that you can't find at other places, you can find through a neighbor that possibly makes those foods or something. And then the reality, what we're finding too, is a lot of these small scale businesses are already operating within the county and throughout the state. And so by creating this program, it's providing that opportunity for them to come under permit and have better health and safety oversight for the community. So next slide. So for the MECOs, there are a lot of requirements. And the first requirement is that the operator of the MECO has to be a resident of a private home, and they also have to hold a food safety manager certification, which is a whole food safety training about preparation and cold holding and hot holding and temperatures and overall sanitation and that. As far as employees working there, they can have any member of their household or a family member working for them, and then they can have up to one employee that's not a family member or a household member. And then all of those employees or family members have to have a food safety card, which is kind of a shortened version of the food safety manager certification. If the residence is leased or rented, we would be asking for the property owner also to approve the use. And then I think that's everything on that slide, sorry. Then as far as the other requirements, they have to cook the food, they have to prepare it, cook it, and serve it all in the same day. They can, the sales are limited to 30 meals per day or 90 meals per week, and limited to a gross annual sales of 100,000 annually. This used to be at 50,000 annually. That change that happened recently moved it to 100,000. And then meals can be consumed on site, or they can be picked up or delivered through an employee or an intermediary service. And that intermediary service has to be registered with California Department of Public Health. What this means is they can't use like Grubhub or Uber Eats or something like that to deliver the meals. And then they're not allowed to have any sort of outdoor signage. And all food preparation has to occur in the kitchen of the residence. You cannot add like an auxiliary kitchen in your garage or out on a back porch or something like that. It has to be in your primary kitchen. Next slide. So the health and safety code limitations on this, there's some differences between a MECO and a general restaurant that you would find. One is environmental health. Normally for a full-scale restaurant, we conduct anywhere from 2 to 3 inspections a year, and those are unannounced inspections. With a MECO, we would only be allowed to do 1 inspection per year, and we would call ahead to schedule that inspection. But we are able to go and do additional inspections if there's a complaint or if there's a suspected health hazard, such as a foodborne illness or something. And then some of the differences between restaurants and a MECO is they don't have to have the dedicated hand washing sink along with a dishwashing sink and a food prep sink. So they don't have to have all the different sinks. They can just have one main sink that they work out of. And then their hoods are just the standard residential hoods. They don't have to have the full ANSEL system that a restaurant would have to have. Animals are not excluded from the cooking area. It's definitely recommended that they're excluded from the cooking area, but we know that having dogs and cats in your home, they're going to wander into your kitchen. So they're not excluded. And then ADA requirements do not apply to a MECO. And next slide. So zoning and land use is where MECOs gets a little interesting. The way they're set up is if the county opts into this program, the cities all opt into the program along with the county, and vice versa. If the county were to opt out of the program, the cities would also be opting out. And they also are a by right use in residential occupancy. So as far as your zoning or local zoning or building regulations, they would not apply to these facilities. And then they're required to have a health permit. And they can also be required to have a business license with the city, but everything would go through one entity, and that would be Sonoma County Environmental Health. And then the law does allow for enforcement of noise and nuisance ordinances. And next slide. So I think we talked about the one inspection every 12 months and that the permit could be renewed annually. And then this program would not go into the placarding grading system. So when you go out to eat in the county, you see those red, yellow, and green signs. You would not be seeing those on MECOs. And then we would really be asking a lot of our partner agencies, so code enforcement, planning, police, and fire. If there's any sort of nuisance or something that comes up, we'd want to partner with the cities and do those investigations. And next slide. So this last year, Sonoma County was successful in receiving a grant for $138,000. And this grant was set up for us to look at implementing the MECO program. What's unusual about this grant is it does not require that we implement the program, just that we look at implementation. And then when this grant came out, there were 15 jurisdictions that have already opted into the MECO program. And now there are 16 jurisdictions that are looking at opting into it as we speak. The other thing that's nice about this grant is it allows for offsetting of permit fees. So one of the thoughts as far as implementation is if we move forward with this program, we would try to waive the fees for the first year for everybody coming in to try to increase that opportunity. So next slide. So in 2021, we did some outreach to the cities. And in 2021, if you recall, we were in the middle of COVID. There was a lot going on. And MECOs were just starting out in some of these other counties. And so we didn't have a lot of information. And so at that time, what we found is that in general, everybody was supportive of the program's goals and really what the program stood for. But there were still just enough questions out there that there were kind of mixed feelings about whether we should opt in at that time. So the item was pushed, and now we're bringing the item back. So next slide. So what we're looking at today is a MECO program, and we would be opting fully into that MECO program. And there's one exception that we're looking at, and that is that there would have to be compliance with your general plan. So earlier I said that, your zoning and building documents would not apply, but your general plan document would apply in this case. And next slide. And so really the next steps is, are to reach out to the county, let us know what your feelings are, how, if City of Petaluma wants to support the program, has any concerns, anything that you would like incorporated into the implementation of the program. All that feedback is really wonderful when we go to the board on the 22nd of October. And that's it, I think. So any questions?
Right, that's the next step here. Thank you very much for the presentation. And I'd like to look up and down the dais and see if we have questions. Vice Mayor.
Yes, since 21, looks like that we've had about 15 counties that have opted in. Do we have some stories or some data now after 2-3 years since then, how these programs are operating in those counties?
So we're finding they've been really positive. The results have been great coming in from all counties. Very few complaints or concerns that have come up. We're finding that about 90% of these businesses are operating as takeout delivery. So a lot of the nuisance concerns that were coming up earlier about like noise or music and all of that coming up around a facility, we're finding that is a lot less than was originally thought. And then some of the other interesting facts is about 75-80% of these businesses are women owned and also minority owned.
Good. And I know in India, there was programs to get women particularly started in small businesses, small business loans. Does this come along with possibly a micro loan system that we work with either at the county or work with the local banks?
So there's actually a really interesting program out right now. It's through Cook's Alliance. And Cook's Alliance has been the supporter of MECOS. They have something called Cook's Academy. And if somebody is interested in starting a MECO, they can enroll in the Cook's Academy and they can get college credits for that academy work. And then they're also eligible for a $3,000 grant at the end of that course. And they can use that grant to start into the MECO business. And then we're also partnering with EDB and like county auditors and all the other agencies. And we're creating like a hub for people that are looking at getting into the business and trying to link everybody up so that you touch with EDB and you touch with legal services and touch with all those other agencies to see if there are any other resources available.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Healy.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. It looks pretty benign, and I don't really see a lot of downside to it. I was curious, you mentioned that a very high percentage of the meals are takeout. Why would the legislature ban DoorDash from that scenario?
I think the original, I don't know the exact reason, but the original part is this CDP, California Department of Public Health, they'll have a full website and it will list all the different MECO operations that are going on. And then it'll tell you a lot of times like what meals are being served and that. And then they are really wanting to keep it as a family business. So that's why it's limited to just the one employee. And I think that's where it comes down to not bringing in a third party to do the delivery.
Okay, thanks.
Councilmember Now.
Can you help me with the scenario? So a person gets approved, they make 30 meals. Does that mean 30 different vehicles would come to their home and pick up these meals? Because I'm seeing that there could be traffic in a small neighborhood and parking situation. So could you help me with that scenario?
Yeah. So first of all, I would say most families would probably buy like 3 or 4 meals. So you probably wouldn't have 30 individual people showing up for that. And then you can also have the delivery. So you might have, let's say, 10, 15 cars that would show up and pick up a meal and across whatever span of time that they're operating.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Councilmember Barnacle?
Yeah, I guess a good follow-up to Councilmember Now's question. Is there a reason for the caps on meals per week of 90?
This is all part of what's been put in the legislation.
Yeah.
And I think it really is, this is supposed to be that, that beginning opportunity to start out in a business.
Mm-hmm.
So they didn't want to have those caps too high, but they wanted to have them high enough that somebody can at least be successful and possibly get themselves ready to go into a business after this, buy a brick and mortar or lease a brick and mortar and go on to that.
Awesome. I'm just saying I support this. I've used these before in other places where I've lived, and they're a great way to help people. So thank you.
Councilmember Gator Thompson?
Quick clarification. If somebody was a bread maker, could that be included in this, or is this just food?
If somebody is actually making bread, there's a program already called Cottage Food, and they could actually qualify for that program. That's some non-potentially hazardous foods, so like bread, they're shelf stable, and they can already enter into that.
And would that be the same with baking, like cakes, cookies?
Cakes, cookies, all of that would go there. Gets a little tricky with like cream cheese frosting because that has to be refrigerated. So as long as you're cooking things that are shelf stable, then you can qualify for the cottage food. If they're not shelf stable, then the MICA would be a good answer.
Thank you.
Councilmember Pozike?
So can we have a motion to support this tonight, or no?
As a presentation, it's we do not make that kind of motion, but that is an interesting way to think about how we give our feedback to the county on this, since it's the county that's going to actually take an action. And I believe Katati and perhaps others have already given a letter of support.
Yeah, we've received a letter of support from Katati, and then we received support from Rohnert Park and Sonoma.
Wonderful. And I think there were a couple other points at the mayor's meeting that I'd like to have you address. One quick concern was alcohol. If you have a food serving business, do you have alcohol permits?
You can have an alcohol permit. You can have an ABC permit, but you would be permitted as though you are a bar. So you would have to adhere to bar hours, and you would not be able to have any other alcohol in your premise. So, for instance, if you get a beer wine license, you could only have beer and wine on your property. If your friend showed up with a bottle of other alcohol, you could be in, you could have a problem with your permit at that point. The other thing is we're seeing that so far nobody has applied for the ABC license. And I think the reason why is it would drive your sales up so quickly that you wouldn't be able to do all those meals.
Thank you. The other point that brought up was insurance. There's no insurance requirement on this, and the cities were concerned that they have an enforcement responsibility as a partner to the county. The county permits, but the city enforces code compliance enforcement, and there's no insurance. Are we exposed as cities?
I don't know the answer to that at this point. I think this is something, when we do this implementation, I really want to partner with legal services to make sure that anybody applying has all those details and knows what kind of liability they're coming into. And then I think also, to your point, it's really important for us to know as the county and as the cities what our liability would be.
Wonderful. Thank you. Great presentation. I appreciate you bringing issues that are coming to us before they get to us, and asking our input on it too. So wonderful. Thank you very much tonight.
Yeah. Thank you.
And we also have public comment coming up, and if you wish to ask a question about the MECO, or if you wish to make a comment about MECO, that would also be an appropriate time to provide that input so that we can hear, the council can hear that. And that does take us to general public comment for the night. During general public comment, the public is invited to make comments on items of public interest that are within the City Council's subject matter jurisdiction and that are not listed on the agenda elsewhere. Public comments are limited to 3 minutes per person. Depending on the number of persons wishing to address the council, time will be allocated in equal shares, totaling no more than 20 minutes. I'd like to ask the clerk if we received any emails or other input.
Yes, we've received 11 public comments, general public comments, and those are posted to the website.
And please read our messaging for the evening.
Yes, at this time, I will start a 30-second clock for general public comment. Members of the public attending in person should bring their speaker cards to the clerk's desk if they have not already done so. Speakers are reminded to be respectful in their comments and that this meeting is being translated. Please pause between sentences for translation.
And we have 15 speaker cards tonight, and so that's going to be at 1 minute per speaker card tonight. And we'll start with George Squornkow, and followed by Chris Parker.
Thank you. I'm glad for the opportunity to express my concern about the reusable cup program that you have authorized, put into practice for Petaluma now. It's a pilot program, but I think it's not a good idea. It's a bad idea. And I'd like you to try to put yourself in my shoes. If I describe a little bit, I have in my household a person who is basically very reactive to toxic things. And, for example, the sprays in the air, the pesticides and things. And by the way, I want to say thank you to the council for avoiding the use of Roundup and putting in, as I understand, using a more natural substance to deal with weed abatement. But several times a week, one of the things that helps this person in my household, she has extreme asthma, extreme allergies. One of the things that helps is coffee.
And I apologize, 1 minute goes very fast, and that was the 1 minute time for your speaking tonight. Okay. And important for everyone to remember, all comments can be transmitted to the city, either turned to the clerk or emailed in. And so I know the 1 minute is very short.
How would I pursue this to go further with it?
The clerk can advise you if you want to visit with her.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
There are unintentional consequences for your program, and I think it's bad to put hot liquid in a plastic.
I appreciate you getting those comments into the clerk. Thank you.
How can I pursue this?
Chris Parker, to be followed by Catherine Babowski.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's Chris Parker. I'm a resident at Youngstown Mobile Home Park and the secretary for the Youngstown chapter of GSMOL. I'd like to thank the City Council for the invaluable aid that they have done in the effort to preserve affordable senior housing, the updates to the rent stabilization ordinance, and the senior park overlay are absolutely invaluable to this continuing effort. And I'd just like to say that what we need going forward from you is consistent enforcement. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Catherine Babowski, to be followed by Jody Johnson.
Yes, my name is Catherine Babowski. I live at the Little Woods Villa Mobile Home Park, and that park is breaking every single law in a book. Every single law. We got a guy that's parked against my place illegally, where there was a propane tank there. That's not a parking area. Vehicles are parked on the fire lanes. The manager and his family, they scream in the streets at night, after 11 o'clock at night, 12 o'clock, 1 o'clock in the morning. We got a bend, and they got the dumpsters outside on Perry Lane. That's city property, not Littlewood's property. And also, too, another thing I want to ask you, how come these presentations take more than 5 minutes when the public has only 1 minute to talk? That's not fair.
Thank you. Jody Johnson, to be followed by Kay Poland.
Good evening, City Council and City staff. As we have done for a year and 4 months now, we've come together as residents of mobile parks in Petaluma to speak out and speak up. We live at different parks, but we are all experiencing the assault by large investment groups on our residents, on our mental health, and on our future. We live in our owned mobile homes and never asked for these attacks on our rights. We didn't seek to be in the news or seek credit for the endless advocacy needed. We sought protection, we sought respect for laws and ordinances, and we sought to safeguard our housing for our seniors who are living a well-earned retirement, and for our families working multiple jobs to give their family and children security. We have done the hard work of listening, understanding, implementing, and securing revisions and senior park overlays. You all have done the hard work of listening fairly to both sides, understanding, and applying the intent of your city ordinances, and taking the time before any vote to see the bigger picture with us. We are your neighbors, we are your grandparents, we are your mothers and fathers, daughters and sons.
Thank you. Kay Poland, to be followed by John O'Brien.
We are Petaluma because we choose to own in this city. We are not hard to deal with. We are not represented by anyone but ourselves. It's our residents' voices that matter, not anyone claiming they know our plight or our plan. Every resident here from council meeting to council meeting is here because they choose to come. They choose to be a part of the solution. They choose to stand up for their rights. We are not hopeless because information is power and solidarity empowers change. Capri had a win this last week with their arbitration followed by unlawful increases and 3-day notices. Capri residents are doing the work to show that their rights have been violated for many, many years. They are humble but driven. They are hardworking and peaceful. They are inspiring in the protection of the fellow neighbors. Youngstown senior citizens are united but fearful. Who can blame them after day in and day out intimidation, retaliation, and complete disregard for their well-being? The senior citizens are inspiring as they stand with canes, walkers, or physical impairments. One thing is for sure.
Thank you. John O'Brien, to be followed by Nicola Fry.
Hello and thank you. In the past, I've only had a problem with my lateral being cut in the middle of Washington Street and dumping in the street, but not well. The other day I came out of my house, and next to my house was a truck said hydro corrosion. And I walked around and I asked them, what are you doing? And they said PG&E hired them to study the natural gas lines to make sure there was no damage. And I'm thinking of what my house is putting down there, and I'm thinking soaps, bleach, urine, vinegar, salts. Could any of that? Anyway, I said, did anyone tell you that my home has been discharging bad stuff? And they said, we can't talk to you. I said, well, can you tell your boss that you're looking in an area, it's 14 feet down, you're not going to be able to see it. And they said, we can't talk to you. So I spoke to the people across the street, the Elder Care, Orchards, Valley Orchards.
Thank you. And please turn in the rest of the comments to our clerk. Now our next speaker is Nicola Fry, to be followed by Maureen Gottschall.
Today. One is that I want to remind you that September 30th through October 6th is Week Without Driving. About 34% of the population of the United States does not have access to a car, or nor can they use a car. So we're asking you, the national program and the Sonoma County program, to take a trip without your car. maybe without your bike. See what it's like for those who cannot afford a car nor have a car. Second thing I'd like to say is thank you to the 70-plus volunteers who joined the city employees and the Rebuilding Together program, worked on the Lynch Creek Trail on Saturday. You have to go see the trail. It looks so much better. And in fact, I was able to use my power wheelchair and take a walk on the trail. So go visit it.
Thank you very much, Maureen Gottschall, to be followed by Rick Parker.
Hello. We are formally requesting that the city make public the formal data collection plan for the D Street pilot as soon as possible. Last week, the City Council decided not to review the D Street pilot double yellow lines, citing need for additional time to collect data. The community is now 5 weeks into the project and still lacks a clear understanding of the city's data collection plan. This information should have been provided to the concerned citizens of Petaluma when the pilot was first implemented. If data is required to make informed decisions, it is essential for the city to furnish both the public and the city council with a formal data collection plan. This plan should include baseline measurements for comparison with post-implementation data, details on specific data to be collected, the methods of collection, and the frequency of data gathering. It is imperative that the city actively engage. Thank you.
Thank you. Rick Parker, to be followed by Paul Alexander.
Good evening. Thank you, council members, for your service. I know it is an honor and a privilege to represent the people of Petaluma. To that end, I think we're at a critical point in our history to decide what we will look like and who gets to decide. And I think there's a lot of concern that there are state laws now that are determining our community, how it's built. There are lawsuits against cities for not building housing and such, and for other regulations that you're very familiar with that force us to do things once any kind of development begins through the process. And I would just ask that the critical element in all of this is us, the residents, right? Please start with us. Looking for input, we can find better solutions that way. I feel the process today, having experienced some of it, is that it is very back end for the residents. The project is already moving through, and you can name all sorts of them in the city here, right? And then the residents come in at the very end and have 1 minute, right? So I'd really
Thank you very much.
Find a way to.
Beverly Alexander is our next speaker, to be followed by Sally Latch. Paul Alexander just spoke. I apologize. Did I get ahead of myself? Rick Parker just spoke. Paul Alexander is the next speaker. Thank you very much. To be followed by Bev Alexander.
Over 100 cities have called for a ceasefire in Israel and Palestine, Richmond, California being the first. I am calling for our Petaluma City Council to also take a stand for a permanent ceasefire. This is a local issue because as long as war crimes are being funded by our representatives in Congress, it is a local issue. It is our tax dollars that are being used to supply the lethal weapons that are sustaining and fueling this war. Much of the world stood by while millions of Jews were exterminated in World War II because it wasn't considered to be a local issue. Is that right or just? If we see innocent people deprived of food, water, and medical treatment, while hospitals are destroyed, doctors are killed, and innocent people are massacred in supposed safe spots, then it is our duty as principled Americans and as principled Petalumans to speak up in opposition to those actions and policies.
Thank you. Bev Alexander is our next speaker, to be followed by Sally Latch.
This is a local issue because it's my money that's funding this war. I come from an Ashkenazi Jewish family. I grew up knowing about the Holocaust and how the Jews fleeing Europe were not allowed to take refuge in other countries and were sometimes sent back to die. So I understand that many of us Jews feel that we have to be vigilant and strong to protect ourselves. But to me, never again means never again to anyone. Because we know what it was like to be ignored by the whole world when we were in danger, we must never deny help to those in danger. If we allow our government to continue to fund the bombing with our money, if we allow our government to turn away from starvation, how are we different from the good Germans who ignored the stench coming from the crematoria?
Thank you very much. Sally Latch to be followed by Ellen Obstler.
I wanted to say that the council has not wanted to support a ceasefire because they were saying it would cause dissension in the community, and you would be called anti-Semites, and there would be a lot of division and hard feelings. And I just want to say, you know, I've been down at the city park at Putnam Park in Petaluma for almost a year with a number of other people who've been supporting a ceasefire. And also we want to stop funding of arms to Israel. And I want to tell you that if there was going to be any dissension or angry feelings, it would show up there. But it hasn't. And some of you have been there. And
thank you. Yes. The minute goes very, very fast. I'm sorry. And our next speaker is Ellen Obstler, to be followed by Flash Welsh.
Okay, I'm also here asking you to allow the community to have a voice about the suffering in Gaza. It's unfathomable that our government is continuing its active complicity, and it seems only if the people demand a change in policy will there be a change. Maybe some of you still feel there'll be upsetting community members if you agendize the item, but I can't imagine any controversy at this point, especially considering the hundreds of thousands of Israelis out in the street protesting for the ceasefire. I recently read an op-ed entitled "American Support of Netanyahu is Killing Us All," in which the authors say that those who insist on unquestioning, uncritical support for Israel are only bolstering Netanyahu in the process, prolonging his power, prolonging the war, and endangering the hostages, and threatening a larger war. It's not too late to choose a politics of life and rebuilding rather than one of war and death. Let's have this conversation in Petaluma. Please, one of you, join with Councilmember Posake in putting a resolution on the agenda. Thank you.
Thank you. I note, Flash, that you wanted to speak regarding the bridge near Fairway Meadows. I think that's item 12, right? So, good. Thank you. So I will save the card. And Tim Porteous is our last speaker for the evening.
Hello, my council. Thank you. I'm going to continue where Jody and Kay left off. One thing is for sure, they stand anyway. They fight however they can, and they know that you must continue to see them and be reminded who you are protecting from homelessness. Little Woods residents wait for the next shoe to drop. They prepare and seek ways to stop the abuse of power of the park owners. We respectfully continue to ask that our Village of Petaluma Mobile Park residents are protected and defended against unlawful behaviors, and that enforcement with teeth prevents the violations from continuing to pile up. Please don't listen to false narratives or presume to believe others speak the truth or or that they ever speak for us. We speak for ourselves, we speak the truth, and we should not have to settle for homelessness or removal of our mobile homes. In solidarity, Petaluma Mobile Residents United.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Mayor, we actually do have one more public comment. There was a confusion on the card, but Deborah Rogers would like to speak during general public comment.
Please come to the podium.
Thank you. Are you putting minutes on or seconds? I just want to preface this with I am a cyclist. And while I notice that there's so many bike lanes being put into the city, and they're very pretty, but they're actually not practical. I noticed on Garfield, the entire Garfield, I think, with the bike lanes, what's not practical is cutting the curbs, because even the cyclists can't get through the curbs with all the paint lines and the cement blocks. So the cyclist is now having to wait for the car as well. And I'm also a driver coming up to a residential area, needing to take a right turn to go to a home or to a friend's house, has to wait because you're blocking and spending a lot of money on paint and cement blocks. I can understand bike lanes, but I don't think they're a good idea in residential areas. And I'd like to know where they're going in Petaluma.
Thank you. Do feel free to drop those comments in as email or text. They're often easier to reply to from email or text. And that is our last speaker for general public comment for the evening. So general public comment is closed. I'd like to move into council comments. And I think I'm going to change up the order tonight and start from my left with our Councilmember Pozike.
Thank you, Mayor. I don't have any committee business to report out on it today, but I would like to just formally apologize to folks speaking for the ceasefire for my failure at the last meeting to verbalize support for such a resolution. I previously stated that if people came here to speak in this regard, that I would reaffirm my agreement with them. And so I apologize now for that omission and wish to add my support for the call for a ceasefire. I agree that this is an appropriate use of city council time, and I'm not aware of any war ever being settled without having a ceasefire agreement first. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Now.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In the past week, I began my year as a member of the Petaluma Chamber of Commerce 2024-2025 leadership class. And thank you to the City of Petaluma's Fire Department for spending the day with us, teaching the class on how they keep us safe. Saturday night, I was a guest at the Monster Truck Show at the Petaluma Speedway with my adult children and my grandchildren. It was a wonderful night of family entertainment. I want to thank the organizers of that for inviting me. Today, I was honored to celebrate and cut the ribbon with the students of Kenilworth Junior High and the City of Petaluma Art Committee on the latest installment of Public Art, a sculpture entitled Woven Stories. And the artist was there, and there is a press release. Hopefully the newspapers will publish it. Otherwise, you can find it on our website, but I won't spend the time tonight reading it. A reminder that this Saturday, September 21st, from 11 to 4, is the Airport Display Day. Come out to the Petaluma Municipal Airport, see aircrafts, talk to pilots, have lunch at the 2-Niner Diner, and I hope to see everyone there. Sunday is September 29th from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. is the Petaluma Fall Antique Fair downtown. Also, Petaluma Museum just opened their newest exhibit, telling stories of Mexican California, real life and myth making. The museum is open Thursday through Sunday, 10 to 4, and I hope everybody has an opportunity. They have talks that you can sign up for, and I've already signed up for a couple this next month. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Wonderful. Councilmember Healy.
Thank you. So just two things briefly. I did participate in the Lynch Creek cleanup on Saturday, along with Councilmember Posake and our city manager and several other city staff members. And Nicole, you're right, it looks a lot better than it did on Friday, and let's keep up the good work. And then today I attended a lunch meeting at Petaluma Valley Hospital with the other members of the Chamber's Government Affairs Committee. And it was a really kind of in-depth dive on why the emergency room and the hospital are both very important assets to this community, and why you can't have an emergency room without a hospital, and what the community can do to support both of those going forward. And I think it would probably be very valuable to have a version of that presentation come forward to council at some point in the near future. Thank you.
Thank you. Vice Mayor.
Yes, there was a Climate Action Commission meeting this last week, and basically we do have 2 new students that have joined us for the rest of the year, which is really nice to have students back on the commission. And we're working on the setting up some priorities for climate actions, looking at general plan and land use, and that'll be coming up over the next month or 2. One of the things I tend to do is maybe get some reimbursement for some travel that I do, and I think most of the council members also do a fair amount of travel outside our city, various committees that we're all involved with. Then I found out that there's a 50-mile minimum on it. And so the many trips I take up to Santa Rosa, which costs me a fair amount of money up there and back, and also to other cities in the whole North Bay area, because I'm on several North Bays. So anyway, just something to think about. We can maybe move that down from a 50-mile minimum to maybe a 10-mile minimum. So as long as we leave the city, that we may get some reimbursement for that instead of coming out of our own pocket. Anyway. And then the other thing is on D Street. I do continue to go to D Street both by car and by bike, and I have made some analysis from my own personal viewpoint as that the comments that have been sent in about D Street are real, and there is some safety issues there, and I've given a report to staff, at least on my first impression so far, and I'll be continuing to do that, trying to point out individual safety features that we may need to correct sooner than later. So I'll be working on that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Cater Thompson.
Thank you. Actually, I've been going up and down D Street also, and have been doing the same thing, sending some notes to the city on possible changes, and they were done. So I feel like they were safer, especially when you're driving by the curves in the road where you dip down. There's now a post there, which I think makes a big difference. I kind of like the lines in the road. When I drive at night, I like lines in the road so I can see. But I'm really going to talk about Friday. This past Friday, I participated in the Footsteps to Freedom. And I'm just going to read just quickly something. The Reverend John Rankin and his wife, Jean Lowry Rankin, residents of Ripley, Ohio, where their home was a key station for enslaved people seeking freedom through the Underground Rail. Their 13 children helped, including the eldest, Adam Lowry Rankin. What we found out, actually, Joanna Pond and her daughters searched, and they found John Rankin actually is buried in Petaluma. So it's a real connection. He was a part of the Presbyterian Church here, and Adam Lowry is buried at the cemetery along with Jean and John Rankin. And I went to school with the Rankin, and so I gave him a call to see if there was any connection, and there probably is, but we don't know. But I really encourage people to read the article in the Press Democrat of the Argus Courier. It's great history for Petaluma, and it's sad history in general. I also was at Kenilworth today for the Woven Stories, which kind of weaves into the story that I just mentioned. But I do want to talk about the piece at Kenilworth. The whole east side, there were all kinds of Indian arrowheads, artifacts throughout the creek. And when I was young, Mrs. Russ, who lived down the street from us on Eli Road, which is now Sonoma Mountain Parkway, had this incredible display of all the arrowheads she would find. And every time, like, the fields were tilled, she'd be walking and she would find more. So we really have an incredible history here with the Indians that were here before us. And I think that's about all, except that I really love the Service Dog Month. It was really great to see people with disabilities and what dogs really do for their life. I'll talk about my dog Coco, who I just adore. And a few times she has done we were in a store and she went up to twice people with autism. And it was just so interesting watching the reaction of the person. And yet I had no idea that she was really recognizing that they needed support. And the mother came up to me and was just really surprised at how the dog interacted with her son, who was severely autistic. And it was just a really good feeling. And so thank you to Service Dogs.
Councilmember Barnacle.
Thank you. I have no appointments to report out on. I will commend the city for the third podcast focused on fire season. If you haven't checked out One Petaluma, it's a great way to sort of demystify a lot of local government topics. And this one's great with our fire chief. Our public art team is on fire because this Thursday we have another art opening at the fairgrounds for Ode to Petaluma, Ode to the Fairgrounds from 4 to 8. And then I just can't stress enough that a lot of you here tonight probably to talk about the EIR, but we're going to have 2 general plan workshops focused on our land use element, which is by far and away the most important element in the general plan. One on September 21st from 10 to 1 at the fairgrounds, another one on September 25th from 5 to 8 at the community center. If you have an interest in the way that Petaluma is going to grow, attending one of those 2 workshops or both of them is going to be the most impactful way that you can, have your voice heard. Thanks.
Thank you. And I attended the Sonoma County Mayor's meeting this week where we discussed issues of common interest to us, and the Mako the Kitchens item came up, the bike lane sweepers came up, the urban growth boundaries came up, all these things that Petaluma is working on. Other cities are facing similar challenges. I also had the opportunity to attend the Facing Fentanyl and event this past weekend where the community came together. BPSC, Muir Woods has our Chamber of Commerce president as their one of their outreach workers, so it was well coordinated in town. And just pointing out what an epidemic it is in our community and how fentanyl is not a drug, it's a poison. There is no safe dose of fentanyl, illicit fentanyl. And many told stories of lost loved ones or finding people in need of support. And they do pass out Narcan, and the training on it is quite direct. And I feel comfortable now having this in my car, and I hope that you all do too. You never know when that need will arise. I do want to wish or appreciate our Deputy Chief Nick McGowan for his presentation. I think the city does real well in support of this. Also thank the Phoenix for hosting, and PPSC's ED Elise Hemphill for her presentation there. Also, the Sonoma County Bicycle Coalition and Safe Routes to School is declaring an October challenge. October has the International Walk and Roll to School Month, and they're trying to roll that out to all folks so that all folks can see by their walking, by their biking, what it is to be a pedestrian in this town and what it is to be a cyclist in this town, and how we can all be nicer to each other, and we can also provide amenities so it's safe to walk and bike in this town. And I'll offer the challenge to my fellow council persons. It's documenting a daily foot and roll thing, so it'll be a fun council challenge coming up. And that's for me. I'd like to pass it over to our city manager.
Thank you, Mayor, Council, community. Thrilled to announce that our Microtransit Luma Go is going to go live on September 30th. And I know Councilmember Posake had mentioned last meeting. I just want to clarify that. And if you upload the Luma Go app, that will go live September 30th. So if you load that up on your smartphone, you will have access to free transit on-demand shuttle service. which we're super excited to offer the community. We also wanted to let the community and council know that thanks to a PG&E local government program partnership, we've replaced gas water heaters with 24 heat pump water heaters in our city facilities. And that's around a $350,000 investment that the city had not to put a dollar in. So we're super grateful for that partnership. Our facilities receiving these water heater upgrades include the Water Field Office, Fairgrounds, both pools, the Marina, the Courtyard, Fire Station 1, Police Department, Community Center, Teen Center. And I want to thank Patrick Carter, our assistant to the city manager, for making this happen. We're super grateful, and it's helping us meet our climate action goals by reducing over 1,900 metric tons of CO2 over the lifetime of the equipment. So really thrilled about that. And Councilmember Barnacle, thank you for mentioning, again, the general plan land use community workshops this Saturday, September 21st, or Wednesday, September 24th. We hope that you can attend one of those because your voice does matter in our land use policy. So appreciate that, and thank you.
Thank you very much. That moves us down to our next item, which is the consent calendar. And I'd like to ask the council if anyone has any item to remove for independent discussion or an independent comment they wish to make. And lacking independent comment on that, Councilmember Healy?
You need to take public comment.
Yes. Yeah. So lacking any council comment on that, I'd like to ask to open our public comment period on this consent calendar. And like to ask our clerk if we have received any comments.
We have not received any comments on the consent calendar.
Please read the messaging.
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you.
Members of the public attending in person should bring their speaker cards to the clerk's desk if they have not already done so. Speakers are reminded to be respectful in their comments and that this meeting is being translated. Please pause between sentences for translation.
And I'm not seeing any for consent, or okay, seeing no comments for consent, bringing it back to council. Councilmember Healy?
Yeah, with that, I will happily move the consent calendar items 1 through, let's see here, 10?
I'll second.
1 through 10.
Second.
And I have a second from Cater Thompson. And a roll call vote, please.
Barnacle?
Aye.
Cater Thompson?
Yes.
Healy?
Yes.
Now?
Yes.
Posake?
Yes.
Shribs?
Yes.
McDonald?
Yes.
Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you very much. That moves us to our item 11, which is one of our public hearings and matters for consideration. And that item 11 is public hearing to receive comments on the 2023-2024 draft consolidated annual performance evaluation report, CAPER, and resolution approving the community development block grant for 2023 and 2024, and authorizing the city manager to submit the CAPER as required by the Department of Housing and Urban Development. And to help us out with this tonight, we have Karen Shimizu, Assistant Director of Community Development, and Sarah Wolf, our housing specialist, to lead us through this. Take it away.
Thank you, and good evening, Mr. Mayor, council members, staff, and community members. Thank you for the opportunity to present our CDBG program, the Community Development Block Grant Program, which is a federal entitlement program. The city receives an annual allocation between $300,000 and $350,000, which is used to support programs benefiting low to moderate income households. Next slide, please. The agenda item this evening is to conduct a public hearing, receive comments on the CDBG Consolidated Annual Performance Evaluation Report, the CAPER, for the fiscal year of 23-24. Before we do that, I'll provide a quick overview of the funding and eligible activities, and we'll discuss the community programs and accomplishments used for the CDBG funding, and then we'll have a short highlight about non-CDBG funded programs that play a pivotal role in achieving our consolidated plan goals, and address housing and homelessness. Next slide, please. Below is a list of eligible activities. The report and presentation is focused on the activities that the city was able to complete during the fiscal year. The city received $330,000. We spent $370,000. The difference of $40,000 was due to carryover funding from previous years that was unspent in programs. By federal regulation, 85% of the funds must be spent on housing and capital projects. 15% may be spent on public services, and 20% can be retained for program administration. Next slide, please. Excuse me. This slide provides an overview of funding awarded and program accomplishments. Through effectively leveraging other funding sources in addition to the CDBG funds, PPSC Meals program has exceeded their program goal and served 297 people more than the program is required to. Rebuilding Together Petaluma was able to serve 40 households using CDBG funds. However, through leveraging other funding, they exceeded their program goal and served 52 households. The PEP housing project completed an elevator modernization at 579 Vallejo, which is a senior housing development. This project benefited 40 low and extremely low-income seniors. Collectively, for the fiscal year 23-24, the CDBG program was successful in serving 789 community members, all who are low to extremely low-income households. And as in past years, the city chose to reduce the amount reserved for program administration and rolled that additional funding into programs. Next slide, please. Non-CDBG funds play an important role in achieving our consolidated plan goals and addressing housing and homeless challenges in Petaluma. This slide shows the work of our small but mighty housing department and the work that we do with local nonprofit partners to create and manage programs serving the community aimed at homeless services, rental assistance, and affordable housing development. So from the beginning in the top left, homeless and housing services, $2.98 million of city funding supports several key programs for the unsheltered community. These are emergency shelter operations, street outreach, by names list management, landlord recruitment initiative, and mental health and wellness, as well as an employment training program. Part of homeless prevention efforts, the city funds rental assistance and fair housing programs through PPSC. These programs help both residents and landlords navigate fair housing issues and also provide valuable support to the city's mobile home residents. To preserve affordable housing, the city funds Housing Land Trust in the North Bay, who oversees our inclusionary housing program. In fiscal year 23-24, the city brought in 5 new houses into the first-time homebuyer program within the McKenna, Riverbend, and Hillview Oaks subdivisions. Under state and regional funding sources, the city has received a pro-housing designation, and through this program, we were awarded for $840,000 to support homeless and affordable housing needs. The Local Housing Trust Fund program provided $1.1 million in matching grant funds to support Studios at Montero, which opened in July of 23 and added 60 units of permanent supportive housing. And lastly, the city received $320,000 from County Measure O NOFA, which was used to support homeless service programs like street outreach, by names list, and mental health programming. And from the top right, you can see the affordable housing development pipeline. Projects listed here are poised to add an additional 225 units of affordable housing, including 46 units of dedicated permanent supportive housing. Petaluma's 414 Boulevard North received $900,000 in home funding and $1.1 million in lieu funds. It received its certificate of occupancy in July and is presently leasing up. There are 18 units designated for farm worker families and 13 permanent supportive housing units. Meridian at Corona Crossing was awarded $31 million from the State Affordable Housing and Sustainables Community Grant Program. The city has invested over $2 million in land, which is deed restricted affordable for 55 years, and the project adds 33 units of permanent supportive housing. And last, the Washington Commons project has received all entitlements to date. The city invested $500,000 for site acquisition, and the developer MidPen is working to secure additional funding for the project. All units are deed restricted very low to low income levels. And next slide, please. So the action requested at council tonight is to conduct a public hearing, asking for public comment and feedback, and consider adopting a resolution approving the fiscal year 23-24 CDBG CAPER report. Staff and community partners are here and happy to answer any questions you have. Thank you.
Thank you. That's quite a bit to go through in one evening. I appreciate all that this program does for us. Anyone on council have a question they wish to raise on the report? Just me? Okay. Looking at the affordable housing pipeline track, I think we've been hearing some of those names for a while. It seems to take a very, very long time to get to the finish line. I think the 414 Boulevard is now open, so that one's hit the finish line. We're putting people in that house. That's really good. But the Corona Meridian project, is it fully funded? You mentioned $31 million, but is that fully funding or not?
The status update on that is that they submitted an application for tax credits. They submitted that in August, and those awards will be announced on December 11th.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, it's so tough to get those projects built. They put in for the money, but they don't always get awarded the money. And so we might have a good project, but it doesn't get built. And Washington Commons is listed. I remember seeing that a year or two ago. What's the update on that?
Washington Commons, the city staff is working with MidPen as well as the tribal communities. Grayton is doing the review on that, and there's been some delays with that process, but we're working closely with them on that.
Do they have an application for funding in, or does the funding come after all the environmental work?
Yeah, actually, I wanted to provide that update. They do not have their full entitlements yet. They need to complete the tribal consultation, and then they've been working with staff, and they will be submitting an SB 35 application for that project.
Yeah. I'm just trying to catch in my mind when we'll get the housing we're thinking about, or that somebody makes an application for. How long does it take before that happens? Could you also mention the number that went into the Housing Land Trust program for this year for first-time home buyers? First-time home buyers, that is still low-income housing, though, right? It's moderate housing.
Yes, that's right. So 5 homes were purchased, and those homes are resold, and deed restricted affordable in perpetuity to moderate income earners, so up to 120% AMI.
How many was that number this year?
There were 5 total houses that were rolled into the program.
So if we get, that's a 15% inclusionary ordinance, or those houses, right?
That's
so
right.
If there's 5 that went into our program, 15%, does that mean we only built 3 houses this year? Is that how we get to 15% in 5 houses?
That's something that we can follow up with you about.
Because, I know we don't build hardly any houses, and I know the public perception is we do build housing, but when 15% equals 5, that's a small number for everything, especially if the number for the MidPen houses is 44 that came on this year. We're building as many affordable houses as we are market rate housing. That's just an interesting conclusion for me. And those were my questions. And with that, I'd like to open it to public comment. I'd like to ask our clerk if we received any public comment prior to the meeting.
We did not receive any public comments on this item, but I can read the instructions. Members of the public attending in person should bring their speaker cards to the clerk's desk if they have not already done so. Speakers are reminded to be respectful in their comments and that this meeting is being translated. Please pause between sentences for translation.
And seeing no one rushing to the clerk's desk, we will close public comment, bring it back to the council, and Councilmember Healy.
Yeah, move approval.
I'll second that.
And we have a second from Cater Thompson. And a roll call vote, please.
Barnacle,
Aye.
Gator Thompson,
Yes.
Healy,
Yes?
Now,
Yes.
Posake,
Yes.
Shribs,
Yes.
McDonald.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you very much. And that brings us to our item 12. Thank you very much for the wonderful presentation. Appreciate the work being done in our housing department. Item 12 is to conduct a public hearing, receive public testimony, provide comments on the draft environmental impact report, consider planning commission recommendation, and direct staff to prepare final environmental impact report for the Creekside Housing Development Project at 270 to 80 Casa Grande Road. And to help us with this tonight, we have our Principal Environmental Planner, Olivia Irvin, and also Greg Powell, a Principal Planner. And are we zooming in tonight? No, we're arriving in style here. Okay.
I like flowers. You might win.
Okay, thank you everyone for bearing with us on getting that transition. Good evening. I am Olivia Irvin. I'm a Principal Environmental Planner, and I've been overseeing the project's environmental review process on behalf of the city. I'm joined tonight by my colleague Greg Powell, Principal Planner, who has been processing the development review application, as well as Nick Papani, who is Vice President of Rainey Planning and Management. They're the firm that the city entered into a professional service agreement with to prepare the environmental analysis. The item before you this evening is the draft environmental impact report for the Creekwood Housing Project. We are now at that point in time where we are in the midst of the environmental review process, which kicked off back in 2022 with the release of an initial study and a notice of preparation. And we have been in that process since that time. And now we have prepared and released and circulated the draft environmental impact report for public review and comment. And the hearing this evening is to do just that. It is to receive and collect comments on the environmental review document. I will just mention that at a future public hearing, the final environmental impact report, which would be the next step in the process, would come back before the council for consideration to certify the EIR. The following certification of the EIR, could the Planning Commission consider the project's entitlements? And those are limited to the site plan and architectural review, a vesting tentative parcel map, and a tree removal permit. But tonight, there are no project entitlements to be acted upon. The purpose, again, of this hearing is to receive public comment on the environmental review, to identify where additional information or clarification may be needed to understand the environmental impacts of the Creekwood Housing Development Project, for you to consider the recommendations from the Planning Commission, which I'll get to at the end of our staff's presentation. And then we are looking for direction from the council for staff to move forward with preparing the final EIR tonight.
And that step involves responding to the comments raised on the draft. So we are in that collecting and responding to comments raised. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Nick Papani to talk us through the EIR review process and the findings that are presented in there. Remember to speak right.
Thank you very much. Good evening, Mayor, Council members. Nick Papani with Rating Planning and Management, again hired by the city to prepare the environmental impact report for the Creekwood Housing Development Project at 270 and 280 Casa Grande Road. So I'm going to run us through a PowerPoint presentation here, and a quick overview on the format here. We're going to give an overview of the proposed project at a fairly high level, talk about the California Environmental Quality Act, purpose and process, cover some key considerations in the environmental impact report, discuss alternatives that are required under CEQA, and then we will take public comment. So let's start with a overview of the project. As you can see on this slide here, there is the area outlined in red is the project site itself, but the project includes what we call whole of the project, and so that's on-site and off-site improvements. We do have some off-site proposed improvements that are shown here in purple that consist of a pathway along the west side of Adobe Creek and a proposed pedestrian multi-use path bridge over Adobe Creek. The project site, the on-site area shown in red, consists of approximately 5.2 acres. That's two different parcels. It's 270 Casa Grande Road and 280. There are two residents on site, one of which would be retained towards the back of the property. That would be in a remainder parcel, so the property owner could remain on site. The parcel otherwise consists of some grasses that are grazed by livestock. I want to cover just a little bit on the surrounding uses to provide a bit of context. As you can see and mention, Adobe Creek forms the eastern boundary of the site. We have Casa Grande Road to the west and the Casa Grande High School, of course, adjacent. To the north, we have Casa Grande Senior Apartments, and to the south, we have the Casa Grande subdivision recently completed, also known as McKenna. Spyglass Road, of course, on the other side of Adobe Creek to the east, and the residential areas beyond that. So the project consists of a vesting tentative parcel map that would result in retaining one on-site residence, as I mentioned, and developing 59 dwelling units constructed across 3 different blocks. The units would range from 2 to 3 stories in height. In accordance with the city's code requirements, the project would reserve 15% of the proposed 59 units as below market rate units. The entitlements or the discretionary approvals that are required for the project includes approval of this vesting tentative parcel map, site plan and architectural review, and a tree removal permit. This is an exhibit showing the circulation plan for the project. Just generally speaking, access would be from Casa Grande Road from 2 new entries. Sidewalks would be constructed within the project. Those are shown generally in green. There would be a pedestrian easement that would allow for folks to travel from Casa Grande Road through the subdivision and then to the proposed multi-use pathway shown in pink on the exhibit. I would note that the portion of the pink trail to the south of the site at the McKenna subdivision is existing now. That circulates around a detention basin. So the proposed on-site pathways would connect to that existing path to the south that exists. And of course, you can see the bridge shown there crossing Adobe Creek and landing on the other side of the creek near the corridor on Spyglass Road. As part of the Casa Grande subdivision, I just would note in terms of overall circulation, a new pedestrian crossing was installed on Casa Grande Road near the high school. That includes a raised median providing a pedestrian refuge and rapid rectangular flashing beacons with warning lights and radar feedback signs as well. The trail along the west side of Adobe Creek that is proposed as part of this project, that would be a 10-foot wide multi-use pathway. That would be stubbed at the site's northern property boundary, as you can see there. As I mentioned, connecting to the south to the McKenna subdivision, and then also circulating, of course, across Adobe Creek to the residential areas to the east. This is just a kind of a zooming in here on the proposed bridge crossing. Just a few details here for you. The bridge would be located off-site on a city-owned parcel. It would connect using a span over the creek that would be located atop abutments. The bridge would be approximately 8 feet wide, composed of steel framing and wood decking for the walking surface, and 4.5-foot safety rails. Generally speaking, the bridge location was determined based on least damaging to the resources along the creek, the riparian corridor. And we'll cover that a little bit more detail when we get into the EIR overview. This is just general CEQA process here. We are currently, of course, having the comment period ongoing through this meeting. We were at the Planning Commission on September 10th to accept comments on the draft EIR, of course, before you're here tonight, and with a final EIR anticipated in late 2024, and we'll talk about that a little further as we get into the presentation. So the purpose of CEQA, we'll kind of run through this here. In terms of environmental review, it's really an information and public disclosure process whereby the decision makers, the public, are notified of the potential environmental consequences of the project. CEQA identifies mitigation measures to try to reduce significant project impacts, identifies alternatives to the project that can be considered. It does not evaluate the project merits, nor grant any project approvals or entitlements. Role of the City Council is to consider Planning Commission's recommendations that were made on the 10th of September, consider the adequacy of the draft EIR, identify any changes, clarifications, or additional information, and to direct staff to prepare the final EIR. I'm not going to cover this in any detail. This just shows the different sections of the draft EIR, including, of course, the project description being the central portion of the document on which the analysis is based, and then we have various technical chapters. The list here does not represent every topic in CEQA. We did prepare what's called an initial study at the kind of early portion of the process. That initial study was released to the public along with the notice of preparation, and that is kind of serves as a focusing document where we've really focused the body of the EIR, if you will, on those topics that required further analysis or identified any impacts that couldn't be fully mitigated. Some key considerations we wanted to cover include significant and mitigable impacts. So those consist of biological resources, hydrology, water quality, and transportation, specifically construction traffic. All those impacts, generally speaking, could be fully mitigated with the measures included in the draft EIR. There were a couple of CEQA topics for which impacts could not be fully mitigated, and those are listed here. That includes greenhouse gas emissions and transportation, specifically vehicle miles traveled, and we'll talk about that in a little further detail. For biological resources, this is a general exhibit showing the existing habitats on site and the areas that would be impacted, shown in kind of the hatching. What's a couple of things to note here. Adobe Creek is designated by the National Atmospheric Administration Fisheries Department as critical habitat for steelhead. Steelhead have been observed in Adobe Creek. They're recorded in the state's database for species records, and as well as the United Anglers of Casa Grande. They have observed the fish, and they have also been involved, of course, in the restoration and recovery of Adobe Creek itself. The project does include a setback from the creek as required by the general plan. All building areas would be set back from the creek by 50 feet, but there are some limited incursions proposed for new stormwater outfalls, some bridge abutments as well. The draft EIR includes mitigation measures to make sure that any work done within those areas is done during the what we might call off-season or the dry season, so that there's not water persistent in the creek that could be impacted by construction. There's also various mitigation measures to protect potentially occurring special status species. And the mitigations require consultation and involvement of the different regulatory agencies, including the National Marine and Fisheries Service, the California Department of Fish and Wildlife, and U.S. Army Corps, if any work is done below the ordinary high water mark of the creek. I'm just going to touch on hydrology for a moment here. There was a recent effort whereby the FEMA agency remapped this area and approved what's called a letter of map revision. That was done in 2023. That effort essentially removed the project site and some of the surrounding area from the 100-year floodplain. Nonetheless, to ensure consistency with the current citywide mapping efforts related to the general plan update, for this EIR, we employed the same modeling results to make sure we have a conservative analysis of the potential hydrology through this area. Using the general plan modeling, essentially the site is mapped in the 100-year floodplain. The project has been designed to address that, and with incorporation of detention features, the modeling shows that the project would not significantly increase any water surface elevations up or downstream. And that includes fill to account for elevation of the building pads as well. This slide here covers transportation in a little bit of detail. This is the vehicle miles traveled that probably all well familiar with. The state's transitioned us from looking at level of service to vehicle miles traveled in CEQA analysis. So essentially, to present this information here, we have starting a current citywide VMT per capita or per person is 17.8 vehicle miles traveled per capita. In order for this project to have a less than significant VMT impact, there would need to be at least a 16.8% reduction below that number, which would be 14.8. As you can see in the table here, the project would have approximately 16 VMT per capita, so that's a significant impact. The project does include features by design to address VMT, including increased density, the pedestrian multi-use path connection over Adobe Creek, and those features are built into the modeling, and so there's really limited effectiveness of other measures to address this impact. That's why it remains significant and unavoidable. The greenhouse gas analysis concludes that there would be a significant and unavoidable impact related to greenhouse gas emissions, and that's essentially because the Bay Area Air Quality Management District has said in order to have a less than significant GHG impact, you need to also address VMT and meet that VMT threshold. So because we have that VMT impact we identified for traffic, that carries through to greenhouse gas emissions. Project is, however, I would note, consistent with city ordinances, not utilizing natural gas, and complying, of course, with Cal Green Tier 2 EV electric vehicle parking requirements. So alternatives, I'm going to wrap it up with this slide here, my portion. The alternatives includes a range of alternatives as required by CEQA. CEQA requires that the EIR include a range. There's no definition of what a range is. It's clearly more than one, but there's no specification there. So we have a total of 4 alternatives, three. And alternative must meet most of the basic objectives of a project and avoid or substantially lessen at least one significant environmental impact. So that's what an alternative has to meet by CEQA definition. So what we have here is the no project, no build alternative. and that is required under all cases for environmental impact reports, and that's simply that the site would remain in its current condition. We have the no bridge alternative, and that includes all components of the project except for the bridge connection over Adobe Creek for that multi-use pathway. We have also the affordable housing alternative, which is that all 59 units would be offered as affordable housing, and all other project components would remain the same. We identify what's called the environmentally superior alternative in the analysis. That environmentally superior alternative is actually the no project, but the California Environmental Quality Act guidelines say if that's the case, you have to identify another alternative that actually would meet most of the basic objectives. So that's where we then identify the affordable housing alternative as the environmentally superior. And with that, I think I'm going to transfer it back to you.
Yeah, pass it back.
Okay, and I'm just going to wrap up by giving a summary of what occurred at the Planning Commission hearing last Tuesday on September 10th. And then I'll wrap up with staff's recommendation, but I am going to take a minute and walk through that. Briefly, there was public comment and commissioner comment following staff's presentation. And after that, staff put together a summary of materials, and because of the timing and the date of the packet for tonight, that came as a supplemental information. So that was submitted later. So that is in attachment 5 of this evening's agenda item. And what it does is it summarizes that the Planning Commission unanimously approved a resolution with modifications recommending that the council direct staff to proceed with preparation of the final EIR and to specifically consider those 3 items listed here. So I'm going to briefly talk through those, and you'll see the write-up in that material as well. But before I get into those, I did want to point out another discussion that occurred at the commission was in regards to questions that were raised on the city's capital improvement project that's in the pipeline that involves improvements to Casa Grande Road. And as you'll see in that attachment number 5, that is supported by a memo from Public Works and Utilities that briefly describes the status of that city effort, which is just in the design stage, and that work is slated for 2027, a couple years out. That's, of course, pending future council budget adoption. And that does lay out some preliminary design considerations for what those improvements might look like. And it suggests that based on the road volume and capacity, that it is eligible, or a road diet may be appropriate, which would reduce the vehicle lanes, and that width could be reallocated to other uses such as on-street parking or protected bike lanes. So that material is there. There's a nice schematic that shows some of those potential designs. But again, those are very much in that preliminary early stage because that's slated for a couple years out. So I wanted to highlight that as well because that was something that had been raised. So now to get into each of the items that were specifically requested by the commission that the council consider. There was a ask that a no bridge alternative be expanded upon, and I just want to be really clear that the draft EIR does already include that as the alternative, as you just heard. So that is in there, and if the council is interested in pursuing a no bridge alternative, that direction could be given this evening, and the final EIR would be prepared accordingly. The commissioners also recommended that an alternative bridge location be considered. Then, as you heard as well, the crossing proposed at that location was selected based on information based on biological review as well as engineering, and it was really intended to minimize the disturbance to the channel and the riparian corridor and the trees. It's certainly possible that other locations could be feasible, but it would be expected that those would have slightly greater environmental impacts. But at council's direction tonight, the final EIR could certainly further investigate alternative bridge locations or provide additional information on the specifics of that bridge location selection. So I wanted to note that. And then The second item that the commission further recommended additional analysis of project impacts and mitigation after occupancy of the project, and particularly related to the riparian corridor and the activities on the bridge. And again, the draft EIR does absolutely evaluate the full operation, maintenance, and use of that bridge. So that information is already in the draft EIR. And then additionally, it's worth mentioning that because the Adobe Creek is a jurisdictional feature, that any improvements, the bridge, any improvements within the Bed-Bacon Channel are subject to the review and approval by the California Department of Fish and Wildlife and the Regional Water Quality Control Board, as those agencies do have their discretion for issuing those permits, and they may add to those measures or add additional requirements for activities within that. So that's another place that they could do that. So the council may wish to provide further direction on the adequacy of the EIR in evaluating the activities associated with the operation of the bridge and what additional information might be helpful to include in the final EIR. And then finally, the third bullet here is the request to pursue the financial feasibility of the 100% affordable housing alternative and its ability to reduce or avoid impacts associated with the vehicle miles traveled and the greenhouse gas emissions. And I'll just, there's a lot to unpack there, and I'll just say that the supplemental memo does offer that additional analysis for council's consideration. And I'll just make two final points, which is that the city does not have an application on the site for 100% affordable. The PROS project does meet the city's 15% on-site inclusionary housing requirements.
Sorry, if I could just interrupt and have you slow a bit down for the translators.
Oh, sorry. Getting so excited. So I'll back up. So there is no 100% affordable housing project that has been proposed. The proposed project does indeed meet the city's 15% on-site inclusionary requirements and the general need for housing as has been envisioned by both the general plan, multiple cycles of the city's housing element, and it is eligible for the Housing Accountability Act, and it certainly does advance the city in its pro-housing designation just by the merits of being a consistent project with the general plan that offers housing. So it is recommended that City Council specifically consider the Planning Commission's recommendation to subject the affordable housing alternative to further investigation and direct staff accordingly when, as we begin to prepare the final EIR, should we receive that direction tonight. So with that, I will move on to the formal recommendation slide by pressing this button. And that is, again, to receive public comment on the draft EIR, to provide comments on the draft EIR, and to consider the Planning Commission's recommendation on the draft. And should the council choose, adopt resolution attachment 1 to your staff report, directing staff to proceed with preparation of the final EIR. And that completes staff's presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. A great presentation. I'd like to bring it up here to council for a few questions on what we just heard. It's quite a bit. So who would like to join in first? No need to have a question if you don't have a question. The Vice Mayor Shribs, take it away.
Okay, so for the final EIR in this process, going from draft to final, is there any options where we could actually suggest changes to the actual plan itself, to what is there, or do we have to just live with the actual proposed plan?
So the project that's proposed is what the environmental analysis must review, and so that's what's been done. But there is an alternatives component, and you heard the range of those alternatives that were considered this evening. If you have a suggestion of a different alternative that might help make an informed decision, that absolutely is on the table for consideration.
So just checking it. Okay, so before I ask my questions, I want to know, I bring up ideas. So I did listen to the entire presentation and comments back at the Planning Commission, and I think there is a lot there that needs to be considered intensely, and needs to be talked about within the environmental report that was being brought up. So if one of the ones is the 3-story triplexes, I want to make sure that we have a shadow effect from the 3-story triplexes, especially because there's the parking lot there, and I think it's maybe not as major as most people think, that because there's a parking area on that side. But the very final last one there in the far southeast corner is definitely going to be having a shadow effect on the garden that's next door. And I know from being a horticulturalist that that shadow is going to highly impact the ability to grow vegetables in that vegetable garden. So I want to make sure that we do a further analysis on particularly the shadow effect and because that was my research project that I did way back when, was looking at light impact on and growth of plants. So I know that will have a major impact. And I've experienced that at my own house, putting up a building next to a garden. The garden doesn't function very well anymore. So that needs to be considered. So I looked at a shadow effect on there. And then also not just the garden, but there's some claims about the shadow effect on the actual buildings next door. And so look at those triplexes, and does those shadows actually reach at any time of the year, particularly wintertime when sunlight is most important?
So you want them to reply?
Yeah.
Happy to provide any clarification on a question. Any comments that are raised this evening on suggestions on what to be included in the draft EIR will be collected and responded to in the final EIR.
Okay, they put that in question. Will the final EIR include a shadow effect from the triplexes?
Okay, so that is certainly something that could be discussed. I would point out a couple of things. One is that this project is compliant with the height standard of the city, so that's one reason you didn't see that in there already, because it meets what is allowed by the existing regulation. There's no use permit, there's no height exception. This is an allowed height. So we can certainly, further consider that. And
so it's not considered an environmental impact that the garden can't exist next door? That's not an environmental impact?
Well, there's different ways that shade and shadow is taken into account. It falls under aesthetics typically. It does come up in places like San Francisco or in areas where you have a much higher or a situation where you have a height exceedance, then you absolutely would look at that. But if you're typically in compliance, then we would not have been normally prompted to look at that. We're looking at impacts that significantly affect a substantial number of individuals. So I don't know. I mean, I think we would take that into consideration, but I'm happy to kind of think about it, put my head together, and come up with it.
I'll move on. One of the things was the complaints earlier about the number of students, amount of trash that would be possibly collected on that, and the travel patterns of people on the trails. And one of the things to consider, two things to consider is, would we possibly add security cameras on the trails to modify or change those behaviors to save the amount of trash that's up there? Will there be a program or a plan to put in place to mitigate or to compensate for the additional amount of trash that may show up from the students passing through? So do we have some possibilities and alternatives to look at programs for mitigations and changes in behavior and patterns and security for the trail system? Is that a possible alternative besides just not having the bridge?
Yes, so certainly I hear one of your comments is to consider having trash receptacles.
I'm thinking about a whole program, having a program where the hatchery folks are paid to come in and clean up the creek more periodically, and that we have other security cameras in place to identify if there's culprits involved for any shenanigans that are going on behind the house, whatever. So is there a impact mitigation for additional features that could be added in to compensate? Instead of a no bridge or yes bridge, how about a bridge with a lot more security around it and a lot more program around it. Is that a possible alternative?
Yeah, that's absolutely something that can be further investigated and detailed.
Okay, good. Because we'd also consider, I think the trail materials was brought up earlier. Can we change the trail materials? Yeah, because I understand they're going to be, is that a possibility?
Vice Mayor, if I could interrupt just briefly, I want to provide a reminder that tonight we are not, the council's not deliberating on the project. And I feel like some of the issues you're raising are site plan and architectural review considerations that are not before the council tonight. The only thing that's before the council tonight is not even actually the project, it's the environmental analysis of the project in those categories that are listed on the checklist, that are listed in the staff report, and the materials before the council in the agenda packet. So, I just, for clarification's sake and for purposes of our focus in terms of the council's task tonight and that staff are trying to facilitate, I'm just trying to provide a reminder, and it may be helpful for staff to try to help distinguish between those things that may be SPAR considerations or project approval considerations versus those that track to the environmental analysis and the checklist categories. So, okay, thanks.
Good. I'll move on to VMT type questions, vehicles, miles, travel. When considering the VMT, allowing the bridge, which means a lot more travel by the students from larger population to the school, does that impact VMT? Because we're having a reduction of VMT from the site next to it because of the travel distances are now lower.
Yes, that's correct. The bridge does have a measurable reduction in VMT. It is, I believe, 0.06% of reduction. So even though it's a major community amenity and a major connection of pedestrian and multi-use pathway, it does not sufficiently reduce the VMT generated by the project to fall below significance. So does that answer your question?
Okay, good. Thank you. That's being considered. And then on the, again, with the VMT and the road safety around there, that was being brought up. There's three things that we really need to consider in addition to the site itself. I was wondering if these are going to be included as far as an analysis. One would be changing the Eli Road to maybe a single lane and bike lanes to make it safer to travel that road. It's changing the Casa Grande to a road diet and adding parking to the entire stretch along that way so that they could park on that side of the street. Is that being included in the alternatives? And thirdly, there's 18 to 25 acres that were priorly up for sale that I was witness on, that I participated in when I was a teacher at Casa Grande. And so that sale did not go through, but that site is now designated as a 15-minute community possible location with a lot more buildings, which could be condos, townhouses, shops, a community center of some sort. And in the analysis of VMTs and the like, if those were actually added in, would that change VMT analysis?
So we would have to obviously look at all of that, but from some of the work we've done on other projects that involve bike and pedestrian improvements and lane striping, unfortunately, the answer is typically no, those are not adequate to fall below levels of significant, and their cost is very, very, very high. So typically it ends up being infeasible and still significant and unavoidable.
Right. Okay, so now we're talking about 18 acres. If that was turned into a shopping center, so the folks wouldn't have to travel so far to go to the grocery store and the like, would that change the VMT?
So I'm understanding your question is if this project were to somehow be related to the project that you're talking about that could be a mixed-use project, could that be something that reduces VMT? Is that what you're asking me? So yes, mixed use projects are something, is a component that could reduce VMT. That is well known and well studied, but that is not the case here. These are separate properties, they're separate property owners. If and when that future undeveloped parcel were to come forward itself, it would be subject to environmental review, it would be subject to a VMT analysis. So hypothetically, theoretically, yes, a mixed use could, but this project site is not zoned that, and there's no relationship between this site and that other site.
Okay, thank you. Now I'll move on to hydrology. Being that the site has a lot of hard surfaces and knowing shifting from a open, basically grassland, sheep were grazed, which lots of water penetration can occur there, and moving into mostly hardscape and then even landscape, maybe weed cloths, whatever's being put down. There's a fairly large amount of water that's going to be running off, even if it's landing on the landscape itself. So the question is the pond in the back going to be large enough to compensate and actually hold 3-inch rain in one day that falls on the site? If all 3 inches saturated soil completely goes to the pond, is the pond has capacity to hold that much water?
Well, I can answer the question of is the site designed to retain what is required, and it absolutely is. It meets all of the city's standard requirements for stormwater detention based on the flow parameters, based on the impervious areas introduced, and the detention basin is sized in order to accommodate that flow parameters.
Okay, good. And in the between now and the final, will all of the questions and concerns of our constituents be addressed?
So the step that's involved with the final is to collate and assemble all of the public comments that were received, and we identify those that relate to environmental effects or impacts, and those are responded to. So it is, and all of them are identified, and if they relate to the project, I'm for it, I'm against it, we say this is not regarding an environmental. So yes, every comment and comment letter raised will be included in part of it, but I want to be really clear that it is not the place of the final to respond or address things related to site plan and architecture review or the project merits. So it's a focus on the environmental effects.
Good, thank you. I'll pass now to the next.
Councilmember Cater Thompson.
I just want to talk about the 15% inclusionary. Can that number be changed? Or is it connected to
that is the city's requirement for on-site inclusionary, and that is what the applicant has proposed. They are meeting the city's requirement.
It's in our general plan and our housing element and our zoning ordinance.
So it can't be changed?
Well, it can be changed, but it's a legislative act. What's on the books right now is what Olivia just described, the 15% requirement. It used to be that was just in our general plan, but now it's implemented in the zoning ordinance, and it's part of our land use regulations.
Okay. Well, that's all I have for right now.
I'd like to follow up on the affordability option, and how is this going to be analyzed, if analyzed, for more affordable housing in here? What we've seen at the Washington Commons site was a 25-house market rate proposal, and when it fell out of market rate housing and went to a nonprofit affordable housing, the density doubled, and there's 50 some odd units being proposed for that. Would we be looking at this as 100% of these market rate houses going in a pool, or would we say turn it over to a nonprofit housing who could build something, 3 stories the whole way across? What do you propose to analyze if we say included?
So we would be providing additional information regarding the effectiveness of that alternative. So I can get into it a little bit. The reason that it came up as an environmental alternative, that's under CEQA, that doesn't necessarily mean that isn't what the council can authorize for approval. That's not what will come before you ultimately, or at least that's not what the applicant has proposed at this time. The affordable, some of the affordable information related to VMT would be doing a little bit of a deeper dive into what the Office of Planning and Research has suggested would screen out from VMT analysis. So on the face of it, the reason that alternative was looked at in the EIR is because there's an understanding that affordable units if 100% affordable don't rise to that same level of VMT.
Right. There's a lesser travel impact.
And so that's why we were directed there. But in practice, and this conversation came up, if you recall, as we were working through the VMT guidelines, there's places and locations where affordable housing gets the benefit of realizing those VMT reductions. And so those tend to be places that are downtown or in the urban core or next to major transit stops, which this site is none of those. And so the question remains, I think, to be answered of if an all affordable project here would actually reduce the VMT to less than significant.
So you're saying for a variety of reasons, it might not, is what you're saying.
It might not. And my understanding, yeah, so I'll leave it there, and I would just, if...
My other question on this is about funding. The city doesn't put any funding into inclusionary housing, right? That's all developer funded?
So the on-site inclusionary is developer provided. We have there are in lieu fees that are gathered when those are accepted by the council. So that's a program.
There's a way for them to dodge the inclusionary by paying it.
Well,
if we let
when the council permits it.
But there's no in lieu if he builds the inclusionary.
Right. If you build the inclusionary, you're satisfying your obligation.
So if
that
the
way.
city
It's
has
kinda
no funding in this, and it's very unlikely that others have moderate income. Maybe it's a question for housing. Moderate income housing is not getting funding from tax credits and things like that at the rates we are for low income. So the potential for the property would be, for affordable, would be to be at a more affordable, lower income level. Are those the things that are getting assessed when you say do something about the AR in affordable housing? You know, the magnitude of it, the AMI of it, you know, the viability of it even.
Yeah. So that is not something that would typically come through the EIR process. That might be, information that the council desires, but I would remind everybody that this is a Housing Accountability Act project, and there is likely limitations in the project that you can mandate, as it is a completely compliant general plan and zoning project that does advance housing. So, and I'll leave it at that.
Ask, what do you see as the upside of including any affordable housing conversation in the final ER? What's the upside of including anything?
So, as Olivia mentioned, the reason this came up is we got the question, I think, from one of the commissioners about how affordability could potentially impact and possibly reduce to below the level of significance the VMTs and thus the greenhouse gas emissions. But what Olivia is, and I think her answer, another way of stating the answer is we don't really have clear substantial evidence in the record that that could happen. And the very important reminder she's providing, again, remembering that we're here to talk about the environmental analysis of the projects before us, not other projects other than the extent to which CEQA requires us to do alternative analysis, but that's a different thing. That's not requiring a change to the project. So what we have is a conforming project, meaning it is consistent with the applicable general plan land use designation, the applicable zoning, and it qualifies for processing under the Housing Accountability Act. It also satisfies the city's required inclusionary requirement, so it is providing what that policy says is its share of affordable housing. It is not proposed to have more affordability than that. Because it's a housing accountability project, that means we are limited in the number of processing hearings for other than CEQA that it receives. It also means that we're prohibited from disapproving the project on pain of some very significant penalties, because basically the project is proposing to provide housing where our general plan and zoning say we want to have housing provided. And it's proposing to do that at the density that we prescribe for that. And the other wrinkle that is not well established yet under the myriad of new housing laws that the state has provided, including the Housing Accountability Act, is the interaction between CEQA, which we're focused on tonight, and the Housing Accountability Act, which really focuses on approval and disapproval of projects in the sense of the council's ability, if it has that ability, to decline to approve overriding considerations, whereas in this case, there are significant and unavoidable environmental impacts. And that's addressed somewhat in the memo that was distributed regarding this project, and we shared it with the council tonight. The council member Healy request we have available because it appears, and there's not clear case law on this, and there's HCD guidance, but that's not necessarily, we've not found that to necessarily be helpful in all cases, that even though traditionally approving overrides have been one of the most discretionary choices that a council's are considered of having, it would appear that's no longer the case for Housing Accountability Act projects, that may in fact count as disapproval, that's prohibited.
So I'm getting we're in a corner. The thing I'm wondering is there any upside to talking about affordable housing there? Could we say, hey, at 20% affordable housing, you do get you hit your VMT number, and it's not an overriding consideration? Is that how you propose?
I don't think we have any data that would do that, and I don't know if staff have more.
Well, that's the study that would be requested, but then it wouldn't be a viable project anyway. So.
Well, and I think one of the things you heard staff saying and the materials suggest is that that's a pretty fact-specific consideration, and just to facilely say that affordable projects generate less VMT, and the more affordability, the less VMT, I don't think we can state that. And for some of the reasons that Olivia mentioned in terms of location.
Let me pass to Councilmember Pozeke.
Sorry, I didn't mean to wave too long, but I didn't know if you'd seen me. I'm hearing, my brain is translating some of the things that have been said, that it is, what I'm hearing is it's inconceivable to get any benefit from considering a 100% affordable project. And I'd just like to have someone either say that's the case or tell me why that isn't.
Well, you mean from the standpoint of vehicle miles traveled and greenhouse gases, or other benefits?
Everything we've discussed, from the fact that all affordable units at that place in our town are not going to have a significant effect on the VMT. That's what I've heard folks say, as well as the fact that you say we don't have a lot of, we don't have the wherewithal to say to this developer, make this project all affordable.
Well, that's the thing I'd like to focus on, Councilmember Pozeke, because, it's still the case that applicants get to decide, consistent with our regulations or changes that they could seek to our regulations, what they want to propose. And we do the environmental analysis, again, also including alternatives analysis. Okay. Under CEQA, but what we're analyzing is the project that's proposed. And what staff are telling you is there's not a mechanism.
We good with that as an answer? You good?
Yeah.
To require a different proposal.
I'm going to flip it back over here. Councilmember Cater Thompson?
I just want to know, I'm going back to the bridge, and I'm looking at the map. And do we have a better mapping of the trail on the south side?
So the graphic that we showed earlier that I'm trying to pull up is the best that we have at the moment, but happy to answer any questions that you have about the bridge location or width or what you're...
Well, where the trail ends, what are the interconnectivities?
The one before it? The circulation. Okay. And I don't think I'm sharing, so let me...
Working on it.
Here we go. Okay, share screen. Yeah. Okay, so this is pulling up the circulation plan again. So you can see on the other side of the creek, it terminates at the end of the existing walkway of Spyglass Road and would tie into that location there. And then on the project side, it's at the southern portion adjacent to the McKenna subdivision.
So it ends at the McKenna subdivision? I'm looking at the blue line.
Yeah, so this is where the 5 is across the Adobe Creek. It's the pink line. So the blue is the Class 2 existing on the other side of Adobe Creek from the project site, and then the solid pink line is what would be proposed by the project, including the that on-site loop around what would be the future detention and the designated remainder tying into the sidewalks on the project site, and then connect to the existing trail on the McKenna subdivision to the south. And that would all occur on this property's limits and the adjacent Adobe Creek frontage.
I understand that. I'm just asking for the blue line. Does it end where on what we're looking at, or does it go further? Okay.
Oh, yeah, I think that segment of the trail is
does it connect to Freitas Road? I mean, where's the connections?
Yeah, so we could pull up the general plan. We can take a look at the bike and ped plan, the larger map of it, but it is a planned improvement along that side of the creek.
Okay, thank you. And I would like to see that if we could.
Okay. So
we live there. Maybe you should come take a walk. All these questions. Yeah, we can answer the questions.
You'll get your turn. You'll get your turn, but you're out of order right now. So this is the time for the council questions. Thanks.
I think the value of having council ask questions first is so the public knows what gaps they should fill and where they do want to comment. By showing you a little of our mind here helps you make better informed comments. And so with that, I take it away from the question of the council and open the public comment period. I'm sorry. Okay. I missed Mr. Healy. He didn't wave as big as Mr. Pozike, and I apologize.
So I just had two comments or questions. One is on this possible road diet issue on Casa Grande Road. I was wondering if that would then subject Casa Grande Road to the new forthcoming 15-mile-an-hour speed limit, and which it's exempt from now because it's 4 lanes, and we're only allowed to do 2-lane roads near schools, is my recollection, and what that would do for VMT. So that's one. And then secondly, with respect to the bridge issue, the alternative location or the no bridge alternative, it seems to me that bridge is really primarily there for the benefit of the people in the Spyglass neighborhood. And if the feedback we get is, if the feedback we get from those folks is thanks but no thanks, then, you know, one thing, this is a little bit outside the box, but one possible place to look would be as an alternative location would be about 3 miles further upstream, because we do need a bridge over the Adobe Creek Canyon in Lafferty Ranch. And that would be something that if the developer was open to it, we could partially or fully fund with the money they would have to spend on this thing. So I just throw that idea out there. Thanks.
Vice Mayor Shribs.
Just a question, again, back to the paths, talking about private versus public ownership and maintenance of these paths. On the other side of the creek, the blue line, that I believe is a public path that I think the city maintains. But the pink paths here, would they still be private paths that have to be maintained by the homeowners associations? And would they have public easement or city easement to all of that? And beyond those paths, since they go into the sidewalks and the streets, which are private streets, would we have easements to the street for bicyclists to go into the streets and have access for the sidewalks for the pedestrians? Would they also have easements in there? And is there any considerations for concerns that things might be happening along the way? And if that's an issue from any environmental impact for this report?
Yeah, so the maintenance is absolutely covered as part of the environmental review. The specifics are that my understanding is that the applicant would build, construct, and be responsible for maintenance, and there would be a dedicated public access easement, as is the case for these multi-use paths that are located on private property.
Okay, so it's included, if anybody bought into this property, they would know that it has full public access to the trails, streets, and sidewalks, even though they're private.
Yes, the exact mechanism of that is likely through the CCNRs.
Okay, is there any mechanisms for restricting the folks that are there? Again, for going back to VMT, is there any restrictions that could be put in place for number of vehicles? Because when you're talking about VMT, since they're one-car garages, is it assumed that VMT is based on one car per family, per unit? Or is it based on the average for the whole population and being applied, in which case we're talking about 2 to 3 cars average per unit? And how that applies to the actual property, if that's being used for the VMT, then without having enough parking spaces for the total number of cars being considered. Is that part of the package of this report?
Yeah, absolutely. The VMT analysis explains the methodology. It is, as we talked about, based on the citywide per capita and the average that was set by the City Council when the VMT guidelines were adopted, and this report reflects that.
Okay, so the VMT is based on how many vehicles per household on average? What is that in actual number?
It's based on the per capita VMT.
Are we talking about 1.5 cars, 2.5 cars, 2.0 cars per household? What are we talking about then? What's the actual number?
Well, I'd have to look back at that data to tell you that precise number of what the citywide assumed. It would have been the overall average
I would suspect
of the population.
the citywide number is higher than the two possible, inside the garage and on the cement sidewalk. There's probably a maximum of 2 parking spaces per household, with a few extras on the side for visitors alike, but those would be needed for visitors. But for the 2 that are in their households, I believe it's going to be below the city average. And if VMT is based on the city average, and the actual parking spaces available are less than the city average, could VMT be adjusted to, if there was a requirement that there would be a maximum number of 2 cars, one in the garage, one in the driveway, for every single house?
Let's give her a chance to answer. Can we change the VMT methodology at this point right now?
So the VMT analysis does take into account, and I can pull that up, the number of parking spaces to the fewer, the less likely it is for cars. So we can look at that. I don't have that on the top of my head, but I can look into that.
The other question, or part of that is there already in the works HOA requirement for a maximum number of cars available per unit because of the parking spaces limitations?
No, there's no HOA requirement. This project has not been approved, and no HOA has been formed, and no SPAR or any entitlement has been issued.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Now.
Thank you. On the 3rd page of our memo, it says, at council's direction, the final EIR could further investigate alternative bridge locations, or additional information could be provided regarding additional investigation of bridge location selection. And I am all for finding a solution for that Spyglass neighborhood. And I think some of the high school kids have cut the fence at the Grove Apartments to get through. So if we do better infrastructure on Eli, then they can walk. You know, it's going to be a little bit farther. They're not going to be able to use the bridge if we eliminate it. But maybe we could use the cost of the bridge. I like Councilmember Healy's idea of using it for Lafferty, but also the park. I'm always wearing my my cheerleader for the parks, and Casa del Oro Park. It needs some upgrading, and those residents, that neighborhood, is going to also be impacted by the extra traffic that this subdivision is going to create. So maybe we could do some impact fees for Casa de Oro and eliminate the bridge. Leftover money can go to Councilmember Healy's other bridge idea.
So, excuse me. So, again, it's important that we stay focused on tonight's exercise, which is consideration of the environmental impacts of the project that's been submitted, the application that's been submitted. Off-site improvements, A, we typically cannot require them. B, they have their own CEQA impacts that need to be considered, because remember, too, part of what happens with CEQA is we consider the potential impacts of the mitigation measures. So, and certainly there's a whole CEQA hornet's nest related to potential improvements that might be considered on the Lafferty property, which I can't conceive how we could create a nexus for that. It has its own special CEQA challenges and constraints. So, I think it's most helpful to focus our discussion on the impacts of the project that's before the council, the environmental impacts of the project that's before the council, recognizing that this is not a project approval hearing. It is not a site plan and architectural review hearing, and that's typically where circulation is really addressed. And also,
I think we're hearing you loud and clear that we should focus on the environmental issues at hand.
Of this
Other
application.
things will come up later.
Right. And other projects, will need their own CEQA analysis. So thanks.
Sure. One last question from me. The bridge, is it in the proposal because the developer thinks of it as such an amenity to their project, or because it's in city plans for city active transportation efforts?
Excuse me. So the answer to that, Mayor, is actually neither of those. When the Casa Grande McKenna subdivision came forward for entitlements, there was a request from the council at that time that any additional activity that may come forward in the future include a bridge. And so it was the direction of the council at that time to request that, and when the staff received that application, we honored that request, and we have analyzed and considered, and the applicant has agreed to build the bridge as proposed and as has been presented.
Okay, thank you very much. Now, public comment. Have we received cards and letters?
We have.
Imagine.
We've received 24 comments, and those are posted to the website. And if we received some after a certain period of time, about 4:30 today, we'll post them tomorrow. And anything we received today in writing, we'll post tomorrow as well. And I can read the messaging. Members of the public attending in person should bring their speaker cards to the clerk's desk if they have not already done so. Speakers are reminded to be respectful in their comments and that this meeting is being translated. Please pause between sentences for translation, and the timer behind the dais will be reset for each speaker.
We have 15 speaker cards tonight, and so doing my math, we had 1 minute earlier, but on this item where there's more latitude, I'd like to extend it up to 2 minutes for each speaker. I'm asking the clerk to set the calendar up to clock up to 2 minutes per. And our first speaker is Edward Oss, and our second speaker would be Mark Pirtle. Is Edward in the house?
Edward's one of the senior housing folks who probably have to leave.
Thank you very much. Mark Pirtle, to be followed by Elaine.
these times people are no longer here?
No. The method for seating time allows that someone in the room can seat their time, but they have to be in the room according to the rules here. So,
In general, you can give everyone a little bit more.
you know, that's a very good point. We are now at less than 15 speakers, and so I'd like to ask the clerk to drive the time up to 3 minutes per speaker. Jim Johnson. Carol. Jack Byrne. To be followed by Maria de Gunto.
Hi, good evening. I'm a resident. I live, walk, bike, and drive in this area heavily because I live in the Casa Grande subdivision. I'm very thankful for this opportunity to speak and give people who are residents with real close insight a little extra information that city staff in their voluminous research and investigation couldn't possibly cover. The bridge option as proposed, just understand, that path directs traffic from the residential areas to the high school through Casa Grande subdivision, not through the new development. That existing Casa Grande subdivision, the pathway that's been proposed to be used as an extension is less than 3 feet wide. I have the opportunity to tell you it's about the width of one of the 2 doors that you use to enter this chamber. I don't think you're going to be a pedestrian and have a bike walking past you on a 3-foot path. If you want to look at options to expand that path, you're going to be moving trees, you're going to be altering slopes in a basin. That will be another CEQA, investigation that goes everywhere. So this is an environmental issue definitely to be considered now. That path was built as a circle around the basin, doesn't really go anywhere else, and I think it's not a prudent use of a bridge proposal to redirect traffic up pathways and sidewalks not built to handle hundreds of students that are changing. That's issue number one. Issue number two, I'd just like you to consider, the staff is just following directions that the council has made on parking density and on other features. The parking density in this new area is less than the density that's in Casa Grande subdivision. I recommend, if blue zones are really important to this city, which I think they are and should be, that the city also direct the staff to ask questions like, how is this proposed development or a future development going to affect blue zones? Because you have an experiment right here. You put restricted parking in Casa Grande subdivision, okay? You can't enforce how many cars people have. Where do those people park? They park over in Del Oro. You're creating neighbor versus neighbor controversy, which is going to be an eventual blue zone problem. And the density in this new area is even less than ours. So don't think just because you've said less parking, it's going to happen. You create problems. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you very much. Maria de Gunto, to be followed by Rick Parker.
Thank you, everyone. I am here to speak on behalf of the environmental impact of the bridge. We have quite a bit of wildlife that lives in that creek. We have a family of foxes that live there. We have deer that run through there. I see them in the evening when I'm out in front of my house on Spyglass. And you talked about the pathway going from McKenna new housing project, which has no parking. Well, the pathway will allow people to have an overflow parking on Spyglass Road. That is going to impact our young children who are out there playing and who have their bicycles and all their toys in that area. It's just not something that can be feasible. We have 2 entrances for that pathway, that multi-use pathway from Casa Grande students who live in the Grove, and they walk through there. People walk their dogs through there. Another bridge is really not necessary, especially for security. We pay for that easement. You talked about that. That's in my taxes. I pay. Right now, there is no sprinklers that are on there. They have turned that off. I pay for that. I have no water. I have brown grass in front of my house. I had to call 3 times to have the grass mowed. And if I'm going to have a bridge, we have to worry about garbage, like you spoke about earlier. We have to think about students hanging out there when they're not in classes, which they come home in the afternoons at 12 o'clock. When I'm there, I see them walking through there. They do leave their garbage. Some of the students do pick it up, but not all of them. Receptacles are helpful, but I don't think they're necessary. But my most secure is there is no parking. There is no parking in McKenna. There's not going to be parking with this 59 homes that you're going to have there with one garage parking in the driveway. There's not going to be any extra parking. It's going to be on Spyglass Road, and that's where they overflow with the bridge, and they're going to be able to walk through their homes through our bridge if you propose and approve that. Thank you.
Thank you. Rick Parker, to be followed by Deborah Rogers.
Thank you very much. I want to first apologize for any outbreaks and things. I'm normally an incredibly collaborative person, trying to give deference to others. But it's really just, it's very difficult, folks, for us on this side. You need to look at that, please, tonight. We've been told that we can only impact or input the EIR. And your attorney, and it was the same at the Planning Commission, have said that due to state requirements, you guys have to do the project. So we can't talk about whether the project is good now. When we do, somewhere down the road, it doesn't matter because your own attorney has said twice now that it doesn't matter unless there's some unique situation, right? So we are sitting here going, this has been 2 years in the making, and the people are not in the EIR. The impact on the people and the people's input to it. If you ask every person on Spyglass, we'll get a written document for you to a person. If we find 1 out of 50 that is in favor of the bridge, for example, we've gone out and talked to folks. We're in that neighborhood. We're here. A lot of them have left because it's so late. We have no opportunity, folks. This is a big deal for Petaluma. We need to change this process, okay? You see how that is so frustrating for us. Also, the second thing I'd like to do is the uniqueness of the location. I really not pointing any fingers. I have respect for every one of you. But there's absolute false things being spoken as true in the EIR. The way into the creek, across the creek, as being the least, impactful, it's over 150 feet from side to side through trees. There are other places where it's like 5 feet of trees. So you just need to be looking. I mean, it is factually false. Come on out, take a look. And I've lived on the creek for 38 years. We've seen the trash. An environmental, you put a bridge over it, look at the other bridges. On Eli, on Sartori, graffiti, trash, right? If you invite 100 to 200 high school students to walk right down McKenna, go over a bridge, don't throw me out, but literally hop right over the creek, there'll be litter, and by the way, down here.
For our audience at home, the microphone is very useful.
Sorry, I'm just trying to help you understand. But something that you did not even put in the EIR, there is a 500-unit apartment complex behind you. Every one of those students will come straight down here, and you are putting a bridge right through your meeting when you're trying to do a meeting, except it'll last 3 years. And then they get there, and it's an 8-foot metal fence that the apartment complex, I've talked to the site manager over the years, does not want nor allow anyone, no kids, no nothing, and they've hopped the fence over the last 2 decades. There is a metal retainer. There is no shorter way for them to get to those apartments.
Thank you for your input. Deborah Rogers is our next speaker, and Gordon Wong to follow.
Thank you. I'm Deborah Rogers, and I actually live on Spyglass Road there's another road in that development. It's called Silverado. Last night I walked to every single home. I spoke to every single person that answered the door. Not one person wants this bridge. Not one person wants more people parking there in our neighborhood. I found out that there was a home because homeless do live in the creek. There are homeless. A homeless man came up into our neighborhood and walked right into somebody's home with children in the home. The man had to come out with his underwear, with a golf club, and just chase him out. So when you build a bridge, you build shelter for homeless people. That will bring more homeless to our neighborhood, and that's not safe for our children. Also, I have witnessed the wildlife in the creek, and this would be a devastation to the wildlife. I've watched the fox with the babies and deer and others, so I don't feel like this is a good idea. I call this the bridge to nowhere, because the entire, and you can come walk down, I walk down that path all the time. That path goes from our neighborhood to Sartori. It's serene, it's quiet, it's got wildlife, and it backs up. There's the fences all along the other side are people's backyards, except for one area where you could break the 8-foot wall or fence, and that goes into the apartment complex. I watch every day people walk from the apartment complex into our neighborhood to get their cars that are parked on our streets. I don't have enough parking for our own cars. And so now we're going to create a higher parking problem in our neighborhood. And so I propose that you take this bridge somewhere into your neighborhoods, not ours. And I also propose that you, if you're going to have this development, that you give us in our neighborhood restricted parking for people who live here. We've had our cars broken into, people trying to steal our cars, our things in our cars. They all come from the apartment. We back up to Eli, which is a busy road. We back up to the apartment complex. We back up to the creek. And now we're going to back up to all of this as well. We're the highly impacted neighborhood, and we don't really want to impact the environment of our environment right now with this additional. So that's all I have to say, but I would like you, I invite you to come walk the path and see what you're actually up against, what we're actually up against, because a lot of things on paper look great, but when you go there in reality, it's not great. And having more homeless shelters in our neighborhood is not a good idea. Thanks.
Thank you. Gordon Wong, to be followed by Amy Hillstead.
Mayor, council members, my name is Gordon Wong. I've been a 30-year resident at Spyglass. My concern is about the bridge. With the bridge, I'm glad to hear that you guys are doing the 100-year plan, because the first 15 years we were there, the water comes fast and deep, and it's only about here to the banks. Okay, so hopefully you got enough catch basin in there. And also I'm worried about, that's actually without a bridge there. What does a bridge serve as a choke point for water? Because with a choke point, it'll back right up into Spyglass. And hopefully that's taken into account. My other concern is that you're kind of undoing 40 years of United Anglers work. You know, that bridge, I've seen the fish come up, and they struggle, okay? When the water's low, you feel for them. They can't get up there, okay? And they have to go up to the mountain. So the last thing is, I've heard that this bridge is funded by HOA. I mean, that's just that's asking for trouble 25 years down the line when the bridge needs maintenance. Have you ever been in an HOA? I mean, trying to get a fickle HOA fund maintenance is pulling teeth. So those are my concerns with the bridge. Yeah. But that's pretty much all I have to say. But thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker is Amy Hillstead, should be followed by Callum Weeks.
I am a McKenna resident. I also have emailed all of you, and you have my phone number, so I encourage you to reach out to me because I have so much that I cannot speak in 3 minutes. But in regards to some of the comments that were made regarding the McKenna neighborhood and that pathway, it absolutely was not designed for this level of traffic. It was designed for the 36 units within that HOA development. The main walkway that the high school kids will use is actually not part of the walkway for McKenna. They will be, and I've seen them because they come over at lunchtime sometimes to hang out at our picnic tables. It's a gate that they climb over, and then they walk down the private driveway, which is not part of the actual walkway. The walkway's on the other side. The kids would never use the actual walkway. They would cut through the private driveway of the McKenna homeowners who live on that driveway. The material of the walkway itself, which is less than 4 feet wide, which absolutely cannot take a pedestrian and a bicyclist, is made out of a DG material. And it's really not good at all in the rainy season because you step into it and you sink and it's muddy. So most people don't even walk the pathway in the rainy season. When you do get a couple of bicyclists that come through, they leave ruts in it. We still have bicycle ruts from last winter, and now the pathway is uneven. And who's paying for that? It's the McKenna homeowners. That's who are paying for it. This is, we have to offer it to the public, but we're paying for it. And I think that's so unfair for the city to require us to have a public pass-through at the expense of the homeowners. It's going to include, we have to do a huge, major overhaul to just take into mind. We now have to make this available to hundreds of students every day and the 5 to 7 large communities around it. It's not designed for safety in mind. In the last meeting, they mentioned maybe we can add lights. Well, the lights will affect the wildlife. And there is that family of 5 fox with multiple deer that's coming through. I have videos, one from this morning alone. It's rather very cute of the fox, but they're all over the area where the proposed bridge is. I am not in favor of any bridge at all. I'm not in favor of connecting the pathways at all. Keep the pathways separated so the individuals who live in those neighborhoods can still experience the wildlife, but without it actually interfering with the wildlife. I also want to talk about the shadow effect briefly because it is in the 100-year floodplain, and if you haven't seen it, that elevates the actual level of where the homes and the buildings will be built by 4 to 5 feet, which means it's going to feel like a 4-foot building, and that is going to have a huge effect. If you don't believe me, go to the corner of Del Oro and Del Rancho. Thank you.
Thank you. Callum Weeks to be followed by Frank Quint.
Good evening, everyone. Callum Weeks, Policy Director at Generation Housing. I just want to begin by saying that we're generally very supportive of this project. Obviously, missing middle housing is something that this state badly needs, and certainly Sonoma County, so it's wonderful to see developers bringing this opportunity forward to our communities. Actually, on the front on the shading front of the shadow effect front, I mean, I have, and I mean this with respect, I have very tall ornamental bamboo right next to me, easily 4 stories, if not taller, and then a 2-story building on the other side. Just saying, my vegetables, my plants grow just fine. We get plenty of sun. I don't think it's really a significant issue here. I mean, maybe if we're talking about, 8+ stories, that would be something worth considering, but I just don't know if that's really worth further dragging this out and investing more dollars into this process when the significance of it is, I would assume, fairly minor. But again, that's my own subjective opinion. But on the housing front, this project really, it's general plan compliant, as staff noted, and certainly would approve, or certainly would encourage you to approve and move this forward, and then we can hammer out the details and, the concerns about the project design and whatnot later. So with that, thank you very much. Really appreciate all your time.
Thank you. Frank Quint to be followed by Sarah Golightly.
Good evening. So, in general, well, I've stated I'm in favor of the project. I think Petaluma definitely needs housing, and this helps. I would like to add the residents living adjacent to the Grove Apartments. So we have the Spyglass neighborhood and the Cali Ranchero Drive. I've spoken to folks on both those drives, both those roads, and there are significant problems, conflict with the Grove Apartments. When residents have voiced their concerns, they've only been turned away by the Grove Apartments. So if you look at the location of this bridge, it's right at the end of Spyglass, literally going right up into Rick's backyard. And it's at the end of the cul-de-sac where if you look on, on Google, you can see where the fence has been broken, where folks have come through there. And so I think at the very least, if the bridge is to be built, it should be moved away from the homes. From my perspective, it doesn't need to be right next to the homes. I live about 90 feet from the Adobe Creek Trail down by Sartori, and that trail is in really rough shape. Very few people use it today. Building a bridge to nowhere, I actually have it right here in my notes. I get that the city has a long-term plan to develop the trails, but that trail today isn't used. And if you come across where the bridge is and you turn right, it's an informal trail. It's barely used. It's been fenced off for years. And I really do believe it's building a bridge to nowhere if the trail stays in its current condition. So if the city were to move forward with the trail, with the bridge, really the only amenity that's going to provide is if we put the work in and improve the trail and make it a real trail. I would like to say, also I would, just echo the comments. Casa Grande Road, really, we're putting a medium density facility in right next to a high density senior living facility. There's already traffic concerns. Casa Grande, in its current state, isn't safe. And so if we put this density on that road, we really need to make sure that Casa Grande gets rebuilt with complete street standards. Thank you.
Thank you. Sarah Golightly, to be followed by Nicola Fry.
Thank you for the time to speak. I do want to also mention that I'm not in favor of this housing development, but I do have some major concerns about what is proposed. Excuse me while I take my glasses off so I can read. My major concerns, I want to mention that I do live on Del Oro, so I am on the corner of Del Oro and Del Rancho, so I am very much impacted by the increase of traffic and both foot and car that has happened since the Casa Grande / McKenna development has gone in, and as well as the houses directly behind me because my backyard backs up to it. First, it's my view that the proposed bridge should be scrapped completely, as echoed by many others. Although I am a proponent of improved creek path access, the bridge in this plan is not practical or helpful to neighborhood relations. The current path around McKenna neighborhood retention pond is made of a decomposed granite product that renders it unusable during wet months, as Amy mentioned. This area is maintained by the HOA and not the city, which I'm sure would be the case for Creekwood, and the increased traffic would only further accelerate the disrepair of the path. I'm actually kind of disappointed that any of you had to ask where the creek began and ended, and where the path began and ended, because I think if you are voting on something, you should come out and look at it. You should walk the path. You should walk around behind McKenna and see where those paths already go. So if you have not already done that, please do, and there are many neighbors who would love to walk that with you. Second, I'm going to take a breath here for a second because I'm a little nervous. Second, I would ask the council to ensure studies on flood mitigations be thorough before the plan is approved. With the McKenna development, the lots were to be just a foot higher in elevation than the Del Oro neighbors. But after the land prep started, a change to a 4-foot increase in elevation was quickly approved by the planning department without committee review and with no notice to the neighbors until we received a letter from the builder notifying us that they were planning to come and demolish our fence for a retaining wall. This was extremely disappointing and disheartening that all of that planning and the proposal of what was going through is not actually what happened. And then third, I just want to really quickly mention that The traffic impact on Casa Grande is very concerning. As a parent with small children in elementary school who go to La Trocera, we do not feel safe letting our children ride their bikes to school on their own because of the numerous close calls we've had as a family. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Nicola Fry is our last speaker. And also, I'm sorry. I'm having a horrible night. I really apologize. And then we'll have Flash Wells after that.
The same person? As Olivia said, the fact that there's going to be or is proposed a bridge has been at the request of the City Council, which means that you are ultimately responsible for that or modifying it. You got one proposal from the developer on where he thinks the bridge should be. Perhaps there are alternatives or the no bridge alternative. I went out and walked it after my planning commission meeting. I now know that I need to do those ahead of time, not afterwards. I'm learning. And there is some real concern, even from my perspective, of looking at where that bridge is planned to go. But it's you. You asked for the bridge.
Thank you very much. Our last speaker is Flash Wells. And again, my apologies.
Sorry about my delay getting up here. I know your time is precious. Thank you very much for the time. No bridge alternative. Okay? We bought our home in a cul-de-sac for the privacy and security it provides. And now that is being jeopardized by people who don't live in our neighborhood, making decisions that will affect us, not them, you. To be clear, we are against having a bridge installed over the creek. The bridge will allow easier entry into our cul-de-sac from Casa Grande Road. It will invite students from Casa Grande High School to use the bridge to access our neighborhood. The creek area, and potentially hopping fences to the apartment complex before, during, and after school. We experienced increased student activity in our area when there was a gate at the back access to the apartment complex many years ago. Kids used the creek area to smoke, drink, and hang out. There were also 2 fires behind our home during that time. Since the access was fully closed and reduced activity is greatly noted, and with the bridge, I fear it will increase again and put safety and security at risk. We've had kids hop fences and cross through our backyard to get to the apartments without the added ease of a bridge. So imagine if a bridge was there. Quick interjection. This is not a crusade against high school kids, okay? But the reality is that we're dealing with behaviors. And there are some behaviors that are consistent that we are concerned about. In addition to the safety, our creek is home to many animals, including deer and a family of adorable foxes, a bridge and a loss of trees and shrubs to make room for it. It will greatly impact the homes and security of these valued animals. 30 seconds. Lastly, the loss of trees will affect our privacy and the views that we enjoy, as well as the trees blocking out the unwanted views of increased construction in homes, buildings. We enjoy the privacy of our creek nature provides. In fact, it is a main reason we purchased our home in the location, and we've been at this location for over 25 years. You don't live in our neighborhood. Please listen to us. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And that closes public comment for the evening, brings it back up to council. And I do want to thank everybody who stayed tonight. It feels late. It's not as late as we often go. You're lucky you got in this early. But I really appreciate the effort it takes and having your personal stories told. And I realize that some of the landscaping out there may need a lift. If there's a landscape assessment district, it's one of the things the city has identified as a priority to work on. The landscape assessment districts have been kind of neglected over a drought period and low funding period, and so they're getting attention. Expect to hear something in the future about that issue. But bringing it back to other issues on this particular, and particularly trying to focus on the EIR, I'd like to invite Councilwoman Gator Thompson to start for us.
I heard what everybody was saying, and I was on the site, but I will go back because I really do want to see where the connection is. But the apartments are very close, from when you take a walk down that path. And I'm really torn. What I'd like to do is, I feel I'd like to keep the bridge in as far as the EIR process, but I'm really questioning if we should do that in the final. Really make I need to make a really sound decision. I want to go onto the site, and I'm really being honest about this. So I was thinking Jack Byrne might be able to, I can connect with him when I'm on my bike and we can meet, and some other people. Another thing is, I think parking permits in your neighborhood, whether a bridge goes in or a bridge doesn't go in, I think is something that we need to look at, because this is a problem in kind of all around the city, but you're kind of in a really tight quarters, on Spyglass. And as far as the maintenance of the bridge and stuff, I'd like to keep that open as far as, is it really the city or would it be the homeowners, the HOA? Other comments? I'm for the project because I think it's a good project. But I'm seriously on the fence with the bridge. But I feel like if at this point I say no bridge, then I can't really look and analyze it better. Maybe a different spot for it, or maybe no bridge. And I'm really open to that. I'm not saying one thing and really thinking that I'm going to do something else. So that's kind of, for me, I feel like the bridge is definitely an issue. I do know where it goes by Rick's house. It is really close. And I am sensitive to neighborhoods that are impacted. We're all impacted in all of our neighborhoods. So I am sensitive to that. And so I would like to keep the bridge in, continue with the process, but really go out there and analyze it and be really honest with you that I'm not going to, say this and then put the bridge in at the end. I mean, just want you to know that I really do want to do some more analysis. And I did go to the site. I know where the pathway is, but I didn't go through the whole pathway and how everything interconnects. And I'd like to see that too. So if I can connect with people in the neighborhood, I would appreciate that. And that's all I'm going to say for now.
I think staff is also asking us to give a little bit of identity to the issues of the no bridge option, the riparian comments, and affordable housing. And then I think also the Casa Grande, but perhaps Casa Grande is not in the road diet paving, not in the EIR. So those comments are not really EIR related. But hopefully we'll be able to make our comments that hit the three main points. And Councilmember Healy, did you want to weigh in next?
Sure. Could you remind me what those points were again?
The bridge, no bridge option to study. And I'm assuming that no bridge is an option. So bridge is still in the EIR and we add considering the no bridge. Is that what we're saying? Or are we saying just rewrite the EIR with no bridge in it? Is that what's the question on no bridge?
So the EIR already has the no bridge option in it. So that is in there. It has been evaluated. It is already part of the analysis. So if the direction is, a majority supports the no bridge, that would be taken into consideration as we come back with ultimately what are going to be findings, and that might inform what comes back before staff. So we will hear from folks as the
So
night goes on, I assume.
what you need is commentary on bridge, no bridge, riparian, and affordable housing.
So, I'm not wedded to the bridge either, but I'm guessing that the kind of comments we heard from the neighbors tonight really are not considered environmental issues that would be analyzed in an EIR. Is that correct, or are they more social issues? I mean, I think there are issues that deserve to be analyzed, but I'm not sure if they fall under the framework of CEQA.
I think there's a combination, certainly, that we've heard.
So what I would say is, despite that limitation, I think I would like to see the neighbors' concerns addressed, even if they aren't strictly CEQA issues. And I don't know how you color outside the lines that way, but I think that's what the community expects. On the riparian issues, I just want to make sure that the analysis for the bridge and everything else is taking fully into account the wildlife that's we're being told is out there. And I think based on what the city attorney is telling us, that it would be spinning our wheels to try to look at more than 15% inclusionary affordable on this project, and I don't think that's going to be a productive use of anyone's time. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Dow?
Yes, and as I stated before, no bridge at this time, because we know what the situation is in the neighborhood that it would be leading into. Parking is an issue citywide, so we've got to work on that infrastructure, possibly on Eli, to avoid people parking in the Spyglass neighborhood. And there will be overflow parking from this project because there's not enough parking for the homes. We do want to think about the impacts. I know it's not part of the EIR, but the impacts on those neighborhoods, McKenna and Del Oro. We owe it to the residents that we think about those impacts that are on those residents are already there, and the residents that are behind this project, and the PEP housing residents who, this is probably way past their bedtime to be here tonight, but anyway, that's all I have right now. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Councilmember Healy, you weigh in?
Yeah, one last thing, and this kind of goes to the parking issue, but the neighbors got to sit through this presentation by the County of Sonoma earlier tonight, but I think staff came into the room later, about the micro-enterprise home kitchen operations, which authorizes people to sell up to 30 meals a day out of their kitchens, which is going to create parking challenges, but that's going to be as a matter of right. And I don't know how that kind of a thing meshes with this kind of a project where there's been a real effort to minimize the amount of parking, probably below what the residents are going to actually have. So I'd like you to take a shot at squaring that circle, and it's not just the MECO program, but things like it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Pozeke?
I think I understand now that there was some talk earlier of alternative bridge sites. I think I'm not eager to see any alternative bridge sites versus on my own walks of the area and what's been said. So in case that's still there, I don't want to study any alternative bridge sites. I'm not sure how it's going to help us to pay whatever it costs to do the affordable, 100% affordable housing. So I'd be against spending any additional funds on that. And I'm sort of feeling like that's the same for the for the bridge, no bridge, I mean, it sounds like that problem is going to still, the issue of bridge or no bridge is going to be decided later on, it seems like, based on these other issues. But I'm okay with, if it's going to make any difference with that, with doing a additional study of the no bridge option, if that needs to be done now for any reason. And also, I don't think we can overlook at the riparian corridor.
Thank you. Vice Mayor Shribs?
Pretty much I'm in agreement with what's already been said here up at the dais. Things to add to it is I did get a chance almost a year ago now to actually look at these plans early. And at that time, of course, they looked ideal. I'm a bike rider. I'd love having a path, maybe allowing high school students to get in and out on a safer route to and from school. That seemed really nice, but now understanding that there's other complications that we now know exist. So one of the things I would like to have evaluated in the parking, since the number of cars on average for the city, using that, if that was the number of cars per unit in this facility, how many cars would that be? So how many, especially if there's visitors, how many cars would be spilling out of this particular area on any given night, and where would they actually go? Would they go over to Seagrass, or would they go down to McKenna, or try to get into McKenna, which they can't because it's the same situation there? Where would they actually go? So if there's actually a plan to put those cars somewhere that is safe and not interrupting other people's lives, if we can get them onto the street and make it a one lane, what would that do? That needs to be part of the analysis. So I'd like to see at least that discussed, or at least looked at, as the number of cars expected to be overflowed into the neighborhoods. And where do you expect those to go? The shortest walking distance from possible parking, that might be across the bridge and in, and how many cars would that actually be? So can we estimate that as part of the parking situation? So that was one of the things to look at. And having been in various PUDs and HOAs early on, my first couple of houses were HOA types. And I was on the board and president of one. I was the sole person on the HOA board at one time. So I actually ran the place. I did all the landscaping too. And so I understand the complications of when an HOA is responsible for long-term management of essentially public facilities. And it's a no-go for sure. If they're going to be responsible for maintenance of these things, which can get very costly, then unless there's a structure put in place with a pretty high price right up front early on in the HOA, those things will not be maintained 20 years out and will never get repaired as they break down. I know that from personal experience. So I am concerned that the HOA be set up properly with enough money for long-term maintenance and repair of whatever public facilities. The other thing I get concerned about is it is mostly private land with a lot of now public access. And we've heard complaints on McKenna. And so I guess I shouldn't be surprised that the students are walking down and using their park as a student park, as a spillover from the school to get escape and go somewhere. And so if you're going to consider the no bridge alternative, which basically makes those two properties private, not public access anymore, that maybe that we need to put on restrictions. These are private lands, no students allowed on these lands, period. And so they get kicked off or called off, police get called, they're not allowed on. If they're going to become private roads, private sidewalks, private parks for those folks. So that's something to consider. If you're going to go with a no bridge, you might as well add that in and say, okay, let's go to a totally private situation, no public access. You might as well go that far. And at least do that as an analysis to see if that's going to be a go or no go down the road.
Stay on the environmental issues.
Okay. All right. Other than that, I pretty much agree with what has already been set up here. I would like to see if in the bridge alternative that there is a bridge, that additional things get added in to protect various things. So what features could be added in to do the protections that are most concerned about? And I am concerned about the fence, folks calling over fences and doing that if they're doing that on a regular basis. That's not safe for them to climb fences and not safe for the folks on the other side of the fence. So I'm not sure if that's part of the analysis that Is that part of an environmental analysis or not? Anyway, there's something to think about. We need to look at it in a final analysis after the EIR,
Yes, okay.
after everything. All right, other than that, I think I'll just agree with it, whatever's been set up here, and we'll go with it.
Thank you. Councilmember Barnacle?
Yeah, a couple of questions came up for me there. I don't remember reading who's going to maintain the bridge. One of the public commenters said that it's going to be the HOA. Is that currently the plan?
Yeah, that's my understanding, is it would be paid for and built by the developer and applicant, and then maintained by the HOA with access easements granted for public access.
Got you. And then who pays for the maintenance of the path that runs along the Spygas Road down to Satori on that side of the creek?
Property tax. Property tax. It's in our tax. We pay for it.
Is it that's a LAD that you pay for?
Yeah, LED.
But it's a public access, right?
Yes.
Okay. So the thing that catches my eye is the complete where the bridge is located is the total inadequacy of the path for the type of traffic that would be filtered through the McKenna neighborhood. So I think we need to, I'm actually in favor of looking at alternative locations for the bridge. Just by I've been looking at the Google Earth thing. I have gone out and rode my bike down that path before, but I'm going to go out again for sure. So I would support looking at an alternative location for the bridge. I know you said that it's not a crusade against high school kids, but that's how it feels a little bit up here, I'll be honest. It feels a little bit like a crusade against high school kids. And there's a high school right there. So I think that we've got to start looking at parking permits or permit parking programs when we do these sorts of things. I'm really concerned about a bridge funded by the HOA. That's a total concern for me long term. If we're going to do something like that and have it be public access, I just have a lot of concerns long term looking down the line and how we're going to, make sure that stays safe if the city doesn't have the maintenance obligation for it. I don't think we need to study the shadows because it's compliant with the general plan. Some of the comments about McKenna, I sympathize with them. When the project was approved the first time, I talked about the flood elevations and that it was going to not be insufficient. So it's not surprising to hear that it was up 4 feet. But when I think about connectivity and where we want to be going, it's and I looking at the Google map to refresh my memory. There's the people that we're hearing from right now absolutely have a lot of really valuable input. There's also a lot of other people in this area that are not here tonight that actually would benefit from the connectivity, and I just I think it's important for us to look at the greater good, and that's why I think we should be studying an alternative bridge location, because what I see right now is that if we're going to put a bridge in here, it needs to be leading to a path that can handle the capacity and the different modes that we're talking about. The 4-foot DG trail is going to be completely inadequate for the level of traffic that we would see if the bridge was put in. So for that reason, I think we need to look at an alternative bridge location. I definitely don't think we need to look at the all affordable housing. And I can't remember, what was the third point?
Riparian impacts.
Yeah, let's look at the riparian impacts. Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you. That is the benefit of having the public actually come to a meeting and actually speak. We do get so much direct input that otherwise we wouldn't get. So I appreciate you all being here tonight. And probably I was one of those council people that said this bridge was a really important thing. I probably did that because I view most everything now in terms of climate crisis and what we need to be doing to get people out of cars. And I think we're very clear where we are in a bad space. And I think we know where we have to get to in a good space with a lot less driving around and things. I think the part in between is a little fuzzy and bumpy. And when McKenna came to this body, and I may have been on planning when McKenna came through, it couldn't be accommodated. A bridge couldn't be accommodated in McKenna, though. That was the original idea. Was you come in, we're going to have nick you for that crossing of the creek there because it really helps circulation, et cetera, et cetera. So that's why I think you find council saying that this is a real good idea. We need to do circulation. We need to make it so people can cycle here and there. But we pushed it off. We kind of kicked the can down the next subdivision rather than get it into McKenna. And with that, the analysis may not have been thorough at that time. We knew McKenna wasn't right, but we knew we'd get a chance to see this subdivision at a later time. Well, that later time is now. And if the bridge doesn't connect to any of our ATP system, if it doesn't connect to trails that the city actually owns and puts the public on, then it needs to be reevaluated whether it's a good bridge or not. I get the connectivity. I still like the idea of having people off their cars and having direct routes, but you got to balance the other inputs as to whether it's the proper one at this time. Nonetheless, I think the EIR goes full ahead. We get us to final EIR on this and get into the SPAR actions and other actions of planning. And I think if it is that the bridge isn't included in the final, I think the riparian issues are dealt with quite well there. That keeps kids out of the creek, keeps the idea away from lighting up the creek at night. That you can't do that in natural habitats. And the affordable housing thing, I don't think there's any legs in taking this any further down that path. It will lead to worser results. So those would be my comments. Anybody remember another thing they want to add to this? So I think that we are looking for a resolution, and we should recap what the actual resolution is. Who would like to make their effort at that?
So the resolution in the package is a really, really straightforward one. Just a few recitals. The first action part of it says that those recitals are true and correct. And the next one would, the real substantive one says, staff are hereby authorized and directed to prepare the final EIR for the project in accordance with the city's environmental review guidelines and the requirements of CEQA. So that's what we're seeking. Thank you.
Councilmember Healy.
So moved.
Second by Cater Thompson. Thank you, City Attorney Danley. Appreciate the succinctness. And may we have a roll call vote?
I apologize. I missed the second.
Cater Thompson.
Got it. Thank you. Barnacle?
Aye.
Cater Thompson?
Yes.
Healy?
Yes.
Now?
Yes.
Posake?
Yes.
Shribs?
Yes.
McDonald?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you very much. And before we adjourn tonight, I just want to mention that we are closing in memory of Max Mikkelsen, who passed this week. Thank you very much for being here. This meeting is adjourned.
Thank you, folks.
You guys are getting off easy.
Thank you for staying calm. Unlike other people. No, you were fantastic.